Welcome to the Monomoy Regional School District School Committee meeting, Thursday, June 9th at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will take place partially remotely pursuant to the law signed by Governor Baker on February 16th, 2022, an act further extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, which includes an extension until July 15th, 2022, of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12th, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting will be accessible to the public, via the Zoom meeting link and be broadcasted to Channel 22 as well. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:33. May I have a motion? No, I don't need a motion. I'm back in the saddle again. Roll call vote. I'll start with the Zoom room. Jessica? Sharon?
Present.
Danielle?
Present.
Nancy?
Present.
Terry?
Present.
Meredith?
Present.
And I am present. Thank you. First item on the agenda is public comment. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Additional time at the discretion of the chair. At this time, is there anyone who would like to join for public comment? Not seeing any hand raised in the Zoom room unless anyone else has better sight than I do. Moving forward, the approval of the minutes for the Monomoy Regional School Committee meeting from May 26, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And a roll call vote. Jessica?
Aye.
Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tully?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Thank you. First item on the agenda was going to be Ms. Gilmet for building naming rights. We postponed that for the evening. She has other things, lots going on with state finals. So if everyone is okay with it, I'd like to move up the Tokyo tip proposal because we actually have some answers to the questions we had in our last presentation. I believe, Lee, did you put the email in here? But that's okay, because she'll have the answers. I did get emailed the answers to some of our questions, so fortunately we have a representative tonight who can walk through all of that for us, so I'll let her take it from here.
So would you like me to read some of the questions and answers that were in the email?
I think that's a good start, so
Okay.
as a reminder, that'd be perfect.
Okay, so the first question I had relayed to our representative Kendall from EF Tours was the COVID peace of mind plan. In the original proposal, it said that it ended at October 22. And so the question was, what kinds of protection or policies will be in place at the time of our trip in April? We want to make sure that if something happens, we're still covered as we were the past 2 years. And so she had sent me this response. While we had a separate COVID peace of mind program for the last 2 years, our standard peace of mind program now encompasses pandemics such as COVID as well. And then she gave us details and links to the terms and conditions. So they did update their policy already to cover pandemics and things like that. And would you like me to go over the options for cancellation? What happens?
Is that within that policy or separate?
Yeah, it's pretty long.
I don't think so. If we can, no.
Okay, just to make sure. So the second question was the implementation plan. So what happens after the trip is approved? And I asked for the steps written out, including parent meetings, student traveler meetings, training sessions, fee deadlines, etc. And so the first step was to, once approved, schedule a 30-minute virtual meeting with students and parents to show them the opportunity about the trip. And then within that, promote the meeting, walk through PowerPoint presentations, collect RSVPs, follow up with daily reminders about the enrollment deadlines, and things like that. And then the second major step is to invite and enroll chaperones to join the trip. Third step would be a training session for myself, since this is my first international trip as a chaperone. They provide that service. And then 3 or 4 months before the tour, they do a check to make sure all travelers have their passports submitted to EF, submit all rooming assignments, and then 2 months before holding the departure meeting to release flights and reminders, like group reminders. And then 1 month before is like one large meeting. And then Kendall will be there for each of the steps as well, so she'll be kind of the point person to talk to. And then the last step is just the, actually going on the trip. The third major question was an explanation of how students are selected for the scholarship program and what does EF look for in the application and who is reading and deciding who gets those scholarships. And so she provided a rubric for what they use to assess the entries, and students actually create a 2 to 3 minute video that has a certain bullet points for them to cover. And their education team are the panel of judges who decide who gets those scholarships. And yeah, those are the major questions I relayed over to her.
Great, thank you. Those were the 3 or 4 that I remember. Does anyone have any questions? Ms. Tully?
I do. Thank you so much. That information is really helpful. A question about the scholarship and the rubric that they provided. Do the students who are applying for the scholarship have access to that rubric so they're able to understand the parameters or what their application would be judged on?
Yes. So the link actually that she gave me is on the website, and it gives them the kind of like the whole outline and the requirements, and then the rubric, which talks about they're looking for passion, perspective, purpose, and impact. And they have a rating of needs improvement 1 to exemplary at number 4. So they can actually see exactly what they're looking for. And each of those criteria has an explanation of what that would actually look like.
Thank
Just
you.
like school.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion points? Not seeing any. Thank you so much for coming back with the information so quickly. This is a action item on our trip. So do I have a motion to approve or disapprove the trip to Tokyo?
So moved.
In a second.
And so I have a motion and a second, and we will do a roll call vote. Ms. Rogers? Oh, excuse me, questions or discussion?
Aye.
Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tully?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Good luck, and
fun.
we love updates,
Keep us
so.
posted.
I would like to add that for $250 more, students can get 3 college credits for completing this trip.
Wow.
Oh!
Thank you guys for your time.
That's
I really
good.
appreciate everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
you for
you.
your time.
Thank you.
All right, next up on the agenda is the curriculum update presented by none other than Mr. Mark Smith. Mark Smith.
It was much better, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Just give you a second, or give me a second while everything gets loaded up. So, try to annually give you an update on where things are in the world of curriculum. I went back and looked when I did this presentation last year. It was in April last year, so I'm a little bit behind schedule from this time last year. So I'm gonna, like I said, give you an update on where things have been in the last year or so. So I will start, as I try to do, I like to cover a couple of, for members that have been on the committee for the last couple of years, I usually like to use the same analogy every time that I talk about curriculum, and for new members, it'll be your first time hearing this, but for everybody else, you're going to get my same spiel. But I'd like to just to define a little bit for everybody the differences between standards, curriculum, and lesson planning, because oftentimes the term curriculum gets used interchangeably when we talk about lesson planning and when we talk about the standards, but they are different things. So I've begged, borrowed, and stolen this analogy from different people over time and mashed it together to make my own. But so I like to anchor it in an architecture analogy. So if we were to sort of compare the standards, curriculum, and lesson planning to architecture, the standards are like the building code. So if you want to build a building, you have to follow the building code in that local area. And the standards for our teachers and for our school districts as a public school are like the building code for us. We have to abide by the building code. The state department tells us if you want to teach first grade math, these are the things that students are required to learn in first grade math. And they're set forth by the state, and everybody must abide by them if you're a public school in Massachusetts. We don't have any control over those things. Those things are determined outside of our purview. Just like the building code is not determined by an architect or a builder, etc. Now, when it comes to the curriculum is more like architectural design. Now, if you were to walk through any town in Massachusetts, you would see all sorts of different types of buildings that look very different from one another. And that's because you can build all sorts of different looking buildings using the same existing building codes. And that's very much like curriculum. You can make curriculum look very different inside the same existing standards. So our curriculum here in Monomoy might look different than the curriculum in, a school district out in Western Mass. And one example, the example that I usually lean on, would be if we were teaching the life sciences and we were coming across a life science standard dealing with ecology or more specifically around ecosystems, we might ground that ecosystem conversation more in marine science because of our natural environment. That same curriculum wouldn't make as much sense and wouldn't be as relevant to students out in the middle of Western Mass. Like saltwater marshes make a lot more sense to our students, so it's more likely that we're going to build a curriculum around that here. It's not going to make as much sense to students out in the middle of Central Mass. Doesn't mean that we're not going to teach those things, but we're more likely to center our curriculum that way. And there's lots of other ways that you personalize your curriculum, but that's just like one small example on how curriculum starts to get personalized, just like an architect personalizes their particular designs. And then lesson planning, so actually to stick with at the curriculum level, but within a school district, you have an approach and a way that you design your curriculum, and that you want to ensure that, so for us at our school district, that whether you're moving, whether you're at Chatham Elementary School or at Harwich Elementary School, that students in the third grade are having consistent learning experiences as they progress up, so that they go to our middle school with common and similar learning experiences. We want to have a consistent learning approach and a learning experience, because that's what it means to go to Monomoy, which might be different than our neighbor school districts, which doesn't make us better or worse, it just makes us different, it makes us us. However, when we get down to the lesson planning level, because we're not so prescriptive that we tell every teacher exactly what he or she has to do at every single minute of every single day, because lesson planning is like interior design. And that's where you have to make individual decisions for the individual students who are living in that individual classroom at that individual moment in time. So lesson planning, I make the analogy comparison to interior design. So if you were to have an architect who built a whole, like one of those like neighborhoods where all the houses on the outside look the same, right? But you were to actually go inside those homes, and let's say there was one home that was occupied by 2 adults with no children, and 2 able-bodied adults with no children. That house is going to be decorated one particular way, and it's going to have a certain type of furniture on the inside, versus the next home where maybe anybody who's raised small children know that you don't put anything of value inside that home anywhere like lower than like 2.5 feet, right? So all the nice stuff is going to be high up. Or maybe then the next home has somebody in that home that's wheelchair bound. So all the doors on the inside are going to be 3 feet wide. And it's going to have tables and chairs that are at a particular height. Or not chairs, but tables that are at a particular height. And the sinks are going to have to be set at a particular way so that the wheelchair can have access underneath. But so these are going to be individual differences inside the house that are going to make those that house unique to that particular individuals living in there. And that's what lesson planning is. The teacher has to take the curriculum and say, how does this curriculum match to my particular students at this particular moment in time? And how do I make this match my kids where they're at? And that's the uniqueness of lesson planning. So with that context, so the curriculum work we do isn't at the lesson planning level. We take the standards and we figure out how is that going to fit here in Monomoy at the curriculum level. So what did we do? So again, it's been a year, so I'm going to take you through what we've done over the last year and a little bit of where we're going. So last summer, some of the major projects that we accomplished during the last summer, and we do a bulk of our work, or we have like a big chunk of work that we do over the summer. We do recruiting, like I do a bunch of recruiting. We set priorities each summer for work that needs to get done. I do this collaboratively working with the building principals, So last year we had 2 elementary task force, one focused on handwriting, the second focused on homework. Those 2 task force worked to establish the handwriting task force adopted or determined there was a need for a K-2 handwriting curriculum and started this fall with the K-2 implementation. And we'll be working on a 3-4 implementation for next year. And the homework task force did a whole bunch of research around what elementary homework should look like, especially coming out of the backside of COVID. We made a bunch of sort of on-the-fly decisions, and they wanted to do a thoughtful approach to homework at the elementary. And that task force did a bunch of thoughtful research and made recommendations that were ultimately adopted for what homework now looks like at the 2 elementary schools, and then made it consistent across both elementary schools, which is a primary focus on reading, which is really all the homework now is at the 2 elementary schools. And then there was some, the elementary schools had been working over the previous years during their PLCs on common assessments in mathematics, and there was a couple of dangling chads, that needed to get finished, and so those were finished up last summer as well. And then during the pandemic, we had developed some PBL units. Those were largely focused around, I had literacy themes to them. With the adoption of our new ELA curriculum, we've been starting to make the transition away from those being so literacy-based, because the ELA curriculum takes care of all of our literacy needs, or most of our literacy needs. And so now shifting the focus of those units to be either social studies themed or science themed. So some of that work started last summer with that they were, it happened to be in kindergarten last summer. Moving up to the upper grades at the high school, for those of you that were on the committee last year, you saw the great presentation that the high school did about the major shifts in the program of studies and some of the great pathways that they've started to open up in the program of studies, and all the curriculum work needed to get done to support those changes. So there were a bunch of great new course offerings across many departments, and then the curriculum writing needed to get done to support that. So you see a whole list of different program and course lists, starting, 4 or 5 bullets down there, and a series of other bullets there, that a lot of that work got done last summer, and you'll see when I propose, or when I get to a further slide, there's a couple more that are getting done this summer. At the middle school, there was a community service learning course that was a new course, so that scope and sequence had to get developed, as well as some revisions to the STEM program here at the middle. I'm not here. That's where my office is, but at the middle school. And then I have presented at previous school committee meetings about the Project Lead the Way program and the grant that we won, or were awarded rather, at the high school. So over last summer, we needed to write the scope and sequence for the grade 8 elective, as well as the first course in what will ultimately be a 3-year progression of an engineering pathway. So the first year was introductory to engineering, and that one got written last summer. And then the implementation team met last summer for the ARC, which is the reading curriculum. So we had the whole adoption process, and then we needed to put a separate team together to talk about, okay, so what was the implementation process going to be? So that team met last summer as well. So I know Mary and Jen already gave you a great presentation on the ELA curriculum, so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time, but I just wanted to update you on the data. So this is as of June 6th. This is the current, most recent district level data, so this combines both the schools. So I want to show you that it's still continuing to work, right? So the two, and just to ground you in what you're looking at there, so 2 different data points. So the yellow line is the percent of proficiency for students. So you see at the beginning of the year, we had just about 40% of the students were reading at the proficient level. And you see that continues to climb. By June 6th, we're already up to 66%. And as if you remember, Dr. Kelly and Principal Oldeck said our goal was 55%. So we've blown right through that one. Again, as a reminder, it's an implementation year, which usually you have a bunch of bumps in the road on your implementation year. And that red line is representative of year's growth. So 100% would mean 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, right? So we've already, on average, across both schools, pushed past a year's growth in 1 year's time for our students. And we still have several weeks of school left. So we just continue, we're already at 1.2 years worth of growth for students across both schools on average. So it's just been really significant growth for the students, which is why you've seen this continuous uptick. And the other piece to note about the proficiency is it's a moving target. So it's not like the proficiency bar has stayed in the same place. So the proficiency bar, as the year progresses, the expectations for like kindergarten, for example, move. So what it means to be a proficient student in kindergarten in October 6th is, let's say it was here, it's, when you move to December 6th, it moves too. So that's showing, the students, the expectation for the students continues to grow, and yet their overall proficiency continues to go up. I mentioned, I think when we were talking about the budget process, that when we had the budget workshop, the high school math department is looking at a new high school, where I think at that time we hadn't started the process yet, but we are very deep into the selection process for a new high school text at 8th grade, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So we've been working over the last several months through the vetting process. We are down to just a couple of finalists. We had a presentation just a couple of days ago. We have another presentation next week. And I was able to actually secure a grant through the Department of Ed to help support year 1 implementation for these costs as well. Oops, that's not the right button. And then the middle school has been working through its partnership, where we've established a partnership with a differentiated instruction consultant. That's what the DI stands for. And actually started last summer with the instructional leadership team, but then work through their PLCs, they've worked to take the overall standards, then identify priority standards, and then from the priority standards, they work to map out success criteria, and from there, that's going to drive next year formative assessments, which will then be ultimately used to drive instructional practice, like to help them make instructional decisions, which is ultimately the end goal for differentiated instruction. And just as a caveat, I put in there, this is one of the ESSER-funded projects. This particular individual over the next couple of years will be working both at the middle and at the high school level. This is one of the places the ESSER funds are being utilized in the district. I don't know why this is so slow to respond to my clicker. Maybe it's just me. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go with that too. All right, so what is planned for this summer? So again, we're geared up with some priority areas. We are little over a year ago, the state did a big revision to their world language standards. So each of our world language department at the high school is in the process, and it started a little bit last year, but it really is kind of full bore this year, going into starting to revise their curriculums, their scope and sequence documents. So we have level 1s and 2s as the primary focus for this summer. Where I mentioned before, those shifts in the project-based learning units, we're going to continue that work at the K4 level. So to make those units more history and history and or science focused. So it's either going to be, in the way that it was pitched to staff, is either revising those units, so using an existing unit and shifting it away from it being so literacy based and grounding it more in either a history standard or a science standards, or if it's going to be interdisciplinary, that would even be great, or even be better. Or teachers can have the flexibility of just completely developing something from brand new that's completely acceptable as well. And then in some areas we're ready to go a little bit to the next step. So once we establish scope and sequence work, then the next level is to then start to flesh out actual units for those scope and sequence, which is just sort of the next level of depth. So we're going to be doing that work in both physics and chemistry at the high school. Chemistry got a new textbook 2 years ago, so it's fleshing out some of that work. As I mentioned, there are some of those new electives at the high school level that need scope and sequence work as part of that new program of studies. And then some of the work that Lisa Westman, who's the consultant, did with the middle school to identify those priority standards require some revisions to previous curriculum work at the middle school, so that work needs to be done. There is a project that's going to be done for wellness across the district, which I'll explain a little bit more, but it's planned for some fall work, a task force that's going to be done, but I have a small group that's going to be working on essentially doing some research in preparation for establishing a vision and a model and helping us do some alignment work on our K-12 wellness program moving forward. And it's something Dr. Carpenter and I have been talking about over the last couple of years about being better aligned from kindergarten through grade 12 on our wellness curriculum. So this is, they've got a small team that's going to be doing some homework. As I said to our wellness instructional leader, I can bring the curriculum expertise and sort of how to organize that group, but I need this team to bring the content expertise, right? I can't be the wellness content expert. So this team's going to be doing some legwork in the background for the fall, for when we get together to do some alignment work, which I'll explain a little bit more in a further slide. As I mentioned, Project Lead the Way, there's a 3-year scope, right? So we did Introduction to Engineering this year. Next year, we're going to be launching Principles of Engineering. So that course needs to be scoped out. So that's on the, that's up for next year. And then Oak Street Academy is getting a revamp, our alternative ed program at the high school. So that course is going to need, and that program is going to need a little bit of curriculum time this summer. And then something that the middle school found a lot of actually success during the pandemic. One of the great things that they found during the pandemic was they established an advisory during the pandemic, and then they don't have it in place during this current school year, and it's something that the both administrative team and the staff are really gung-ho about reestablishing next year as part of their schedule. And so there's going to be a team that's going to be working on developing the curriculum that the teachers will be using during that advisory time next year. So there's a team that's going to be working on developing that. And there's a couple other things that didn't make it on there because I got emailed about them and settled on them in the last couple of days since I sent the slide in to you. But so, like, for example, like the robotics curriculum at the high school, I just learned needs to be revised. So there are a couple of other additions, but those are the highlights. And then going to the fall, we will have through several different conversations I've had across the district, I believe it's time to bring together a full K-12 writing task force, and we're going to focus on evidence-based writing. Essentially, I need to do a little bit more time thinking exactly out and mapping out the details. I need a little bit of summer quiet time to think this all the way through. But essentially, the idea is that, I guess if you sort of, so we've had so many conversations around the portrait of the graduate, but essentially the idea is to establish this group, which will be made up of representatives from K2, representatives from 3-4, representatives from 5-7, and representatives from 8-12. We will work first on establishing, from an evidence-based writing perspective, what it is that we expect our 12th graders to be able to do when they exit Monomoy. So, from a thesis and how they back that up and how they support it, et cetera, what does that look like? Exactly what is it we expect our seniors, every senior, to be able to do. And then we're going to take that and we're going to walk it all the way back to kindergarten. And what is the language that we use? What's the ways that we support it? How are we going to instruct it? And we're going to do that, but narrow. Other writing task force, we try to cover everything. We're just going to do it with evidence-based writing first and take that all the way back. Then if we accomplish that goal, then we can move into another form of writing, but we're going to stay, my goal here is to stay narrow focused so that we can actually accomplish this goal all the way back. It's something that I've heard through my conversations throughout the course of the year. And then, as I mentioned, this wellness task force, using the work from the summer, we're going to establish a wellness vision, which really means, like, what's our framework for wellness? There's several different models, but, like, what does it mean? When we say wellness, what do we mean? Like some models will talk about, like, spiritual wellness and fitness and nutrition, but, like, what do we mean? Like, when we talk from a curriculum standpoint, what is that we mean in Monomoy? What are we building our curriculum around? And again, starting from kindergarten all the way up, what is it that we're building towards? And then once we have that model, we can then look at our curriculum and look at our instruction and establish where we have gaps that might need to be filled and build from there. So those are the two projects as of today that I have established for the fall.
I will open it up to questions for Mr. Smith. It's all so quiet. I will start if, Danielle, why don't you start and then.
Thanks. I really appreciate everything you laid out, and especially the analogy of architecture and how that overlays with, the different levels of curriculum and instruction. And this is, I guess, sort of more of a philosophical question for you, but how would you articulate your approach to our curriculum as a curriculum director?
So, that's a good question. That's a really broad one. I don't know how much time you have. Yeah, so I think, a couple of broad-based things. One, that I need to be able to guarantee from my position that we have certain things that are in common. I've said, going back to when I first started, well, shortly after I first started, because I didn't want to make too many waves when I first started, but that, I have expectations, that if you're in third grade at Chatham Elementary School, third grade at Harwich Elementary School, or any different third grade classroom at Harwich Elementary School, or any different third grade classroom at Chatham Elementary School, that I can guarantee from my seat that you're going to have you're going to have the same learning expectations, and you're going to have the same learning, your curriculum is going to be built around the same learning outcomes. Now, does that mean that, and I always say this to the teachers, I'm not expecting the Stepford wives, right? I'm not expecting that on Thursday, January whatever, that everybody's on the same page, on the same time, because that takes away the art of teaching, and that takes away that whole part about lesson planning, because then you're not responding to the kids that are in front of you. However, and there's lots of studies that will talk about the fact that on anywhere from somewhere between 380 to 420 days are needed. If you're going to teach every standard to the depth and breadth that they're described, you would need somewhere between 380 and 400 days to cover them. And we all know that that's a little more than we have to teach, right? So teachers are left, if left completely to their own devices, they're left to make decisions, because they have to make decisions. They have to make decisions on what they're going to prioritize and what they're going to cut. So if you don't have a curriculum, then if you were all teachers, you're all going to start making individual decisions on what you decide to cut and what you decide not to cut and what you're going to prioritize and what you're not going to prioritize. So a well-articulated curriculum means that you're all going to make a joint decision on what's the most important, what we're going to prioritize for third grade, because it's the most important thing to prepare kids for fourth grade. And we're going to decide that as a group because that's what's the most important for Monomoy, for fourth grade, for fifth grade, so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's where I see the value in curriculum, is that we need to make a joint decision, because the reality is none of us have enough time to teach everything that they're expecting us to teach. And we're all going to end up having to make decisions, so we need to make the same decisions, because the kids in Meredith's class and the kids in Jackie's class are all going to get mixed up next year and put in your classroom. So we need to make sure that when they move on, they've had the same content and the same experiences, so that you're then not having to try to plug all these different holes, right? That we know what's getting moved on to the next teacher.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mine will color better than Mary's. Is there another question or anything out there right now? I had one question. Back to the history and science unit development for K through 4. I found that really interesting because it automatically alerted me to when we took Spanish out and we put science in.
Yep.
So can you speak to, we're not phasing science out or making one more than the other. Can you just talk about it a little bit more?
Yeah, so that the science that's in, or if I circle back to the first part of your question, so this science that we added for Spanish is in the Unified Arts rotation, right? So it's an additional lab science. So what this is inside the general ed classroom units. So it's what kids are getting with their, third grade teacher as part of their traditional experience. So it's taking the existing, so that one time a week that the kids get that science lab isn't enough to get them all the science instruction that they need. So it's just reshifting some of the focus for some of our existing units, like I said, that were a little too heavy on, well, they were largely focused around literacy standards. They don't need to be focused on literacy standards anymore because we have another spot for that, or we have something else filling that need. And we made a couple other shifts. We had a couple other resources in the district that were being underutilized, and we made a decision to move away from those because we were spending money on something that people weren't using, if I'm being perfectly honest. So we now going to create a space for some people to create some stuff that people will use. That are going to meet the standards.
And is that part of the project base you were talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's because students did enjoy the experience of it being an inquiry. I didn't want it to be, in the way it's like, if you read the stuff that I put out to the staff about this, I don't want it to be like a sit and get experience for students. I want it to be more inquiry based. The unit design for these units, I want them to be more inquiry based for students.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, great, seeing none. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the preschool evaluation presented by Ms. Melissa Mcguire.
Good evening. Melissa Mcguire, Director of Student Services. Very happy to be here tonight to present our program evaluation we conducted over the last couple of months. I think I have to point it that way. Oops. Sorry. All right. So I want to just start with an overview, and I know we've had a couple of meetings where we've talked about the purpose of preschool, but certainly we really want to highlight that our integrated preschool program gives a robust program. And I say that given in the context that it's a 2.5-hour program with an AM and a PM session. And so what we learned through our program evaluation was how much actually happens in 2.5 hours. So it was incredible. So I'm happy to have this first because it really does provide a high-quality social language, early academic experience that really addresses the whole child. So we're happy to be able to present that first. And then really talk about the purpose, which we have discussed before. The purpose of preschool really is designed for students 3 to 5 years of age with disabilities. And with that, with an integrated program, that we have a ratio of students, 49% receiving special education services and 51% with their community friends. So the evaluation,
Excited tonight.
I know. All right, the evaluation process consisted of several components. First, we did a site visit and observations. We had a parent survey. We did an instructional assistant survey. We had parent focus groups. We did an instructional assistant focus group, and then we did a self-assessment, which was conducted by the preschool team, which included the special education teachers, the speech and language pathologists, and the occupational therapist. And that's why you don't see a focus group for that team, is because they actually did their own self-assessment. So just a little bit of the enrollment, because as you know that changes throughout the year, and so these numbers may be different from the last time we presented our enrollment. Currently, as of May, and actually it's a little bit more because we had 1 or 2 more students from the beginning of May start. We have 46 students across 2 of the sessions and now across 3 preschool classrooms. So we did open up a new preschool classroom in March. And so that now has a total of 9 students, 5 in the AM and 4 in the PM. And the next slide is going to show our projected enrollment for next year. And I'm so grateful that we have that 3rd classroom, because if you notice, the total is 62 students for those students that we know that will be exiting early intervention and starting with us in the early fall. So that number does not account for post-November and December and January. So we're really we're keeping a very close eye on those numbers and the students who we are getting referred for. Part of it's not an issue, but it's just how it works, is we don't get the referral list for 6 months. So we only get it twice a year, and in that list, oftentimes there are students identified, they're marked, but they're not necessarily students that give us any indication of the level of disability that they might have for us to evaluate. We oftentimes don't even get that until a month or 2 months before we're actually doing the screening. So it makes it very difficult to plan 6 months out, and we don't have necessarily all of the information. We just know there's a certain number of students currently receiving early intervention. So it's definitely it's a difficult game to play with the numbers. So I'm going to start with the site visit and observations. We had 5 members from Monomoy Regional School District that made up the site visiting team. We had Mary Aldak, we had Mark Smith, Joy Jordan, myself, and Jennifer Kelly. I'm going to talk a little bit what that looks like. What we used is the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale, which is a widely used comprehensive assessment, and it goes through a significant amount of standards. I should have brought it so you could take a peek at it. I'm happy to send that around at some point if you're interested in the assessment. But it is, not only is it environmental in terms of looking at the classrooms, the structures, the playground, but it really looks at a broad developmental need of all children, including cognitive, social, emotional, physical health, and safety. So what I did, I was trying to figure out the best way to present the data, because there is a lot of data, if you noticed in your report. So I wanted to make it as simple as possible, but really show where the scores fell. And how we got the scores is between the 5 individuals who did the observations. We did it across Monday through Friday, not the same week, they were scheduled times, and AM and PM sessions. So we all had to have AM and PM sessions, and there had to be coverage Monday through Friday. So it's a really nice representation of what was seen in the time that we did our observations. So what I did is from the scores, it's basically a Likert scale, and either these things occur or they don't occur, and depending on how they're occurring, you're rating what you're observing. So what I did is, because we obviously all use the same scale, is I took everyone's rating for each of the overall categories and then the individual indicators, and then I averaged it so that I could get a good representation of the scores. So what you're seeing is the blue indicates those final scores, those overall scores, by taking the average of everyone's observation. What's really nice to see is that the blue, those scores, are not anywhere in the 1, 2, or 3 range, which is, certainly the inadequate or minimal or fair range. So that was really nice to see those scores. The one area that we did see the lowest score is the learning activities, and I'm going to actually drill down a little more to explain that area. So basically, from these data, we're doing okay. We're really happy with what we were seeing. So overall, just a summary, the scores in all categories range from fair to excellent, with no scores below fair, and that fair score was in those learning activities. The personal care routine scored in the excellent range, and then 80% of the categories scored within the good range. The learning activities, one of the things that we really noticed is that it's in the 2.5-hour session, you are prohibited from doing every single indicator that's in that evaluation, but we had to score it. So if you look in the report, and I can answer more questions about that, but as we were really thinking about this and that 2.5, how much was getting accomplished, we had no choice, but like if there was a day and blocks weren't being played with, we had to say no blocks. And so that really affected the scores. So, and even across those 5 days, you might not see, blocks might only happen once, which means it goes into a lower scored category because of it. So it was kind of interesting to look at that. And it wasn't a surprise when we talked to the team about the results. We had a really nice team meeting about these results and really looking at some of those areas that we said, yeah, how can we build opportunities for drama and for play and for some of these other things that, weren't happening because they were implementing, other curriculum areas that were a priority. So next, our parent survey, we sent that out in January to all preschool parents, and there was a total of 13 respondents, which was a really nice return rate based on the number of parents we have, certainly much higher than a typical response rate. I didn't put all of these responses in here, but just certainly a few of them in terms of some of the highlights of what parents said. My child's preschool teacher lets me know right away if my child's having a problem. Sorry, that got cut off a little bit, having a problem. And so, looking at those numbers, the blue is always, and the red is almost always, and the orange is sometimes. So I'm really looking for the blues and the reds. And the oranges, the oranges definitely is an area that we want to look at and figure out what is it that's happening only sometimes that we want to make happen more. And of course, the green rarely is obviously something that we really want to look at. So in the second question up top right there, my child's preschool teacher and the school give me useful information about how to improve my child's progress. So even with, the 55%, or is that 53? I can't see that far, sorry, 55 always, and, almost always, and sometimes, we had a couple that said rarely, so we really want to pay attention to things where parents are feeling like they're not getting enough information or not enough communication. I understand the standards my child is supposed to meet. Again, we have pretty much all parents responded, always, almost always, and then that small group of sometimes. And then, do you receive information regarding the activities in your child's classroom? Yes was a pretty heavy response, and then a couple of parents said sometimes. Do you feel that your child is being prepared for kindergarten experience? That was pretty much a yes and somewhat. So happy that a good majority of parents feel their child is being prepared for their kindergarten experience. How would you rate your child's interest towards preschool? Again, very favorable in terms of the children's experience. In our preschool classrooms, child-friendly. Of course, love seeing the all blue. The blue, makes me ecstatic. And are your preschool teachers helpful when needed? So those were really nice responses. I put this here because, interestingly enough, in the survey, what came out loud and clear is the teachers and the staff. And that was even through the focus groups, really was our teachers and our staff. So certainly wanted to highlight them here and commend them. And if you want to send them a little, I heard you guys rock, that's great. So our self-assessment, this also was a pretty large tool that they took a couple of months to really sit down and answer the questions. Now, these are the overall categories, and of course, within those, which you have in your report, gives you all those indicators and those subcategories. And so in looking at the overall results, what I highlighted in blue are things that happen 100% of the time. And then the way it works is in terms of if it's not 100% of the time, is it easy to implement? Might take a little time, or would it be really difficult to implement? And there wasn't anything in the hard to implement or in will take time to implement. Most everything really fell within that can be done easily. And I think there was one indicator it might be difficult to implement. So we took this and certainly all of the other surveys and information, and when we get to those slides, talks about, really what are our areas of strengths and what are our areas of recommendations. So, and I broke this down into the components of the evaluation. So for the first one on the site visits and the observations, I did accommodations and areas to consider. So looking at the scores in all the categories, range from fair to excellence with no scores below fair. The personal care routines, 80% of the categories scored within the good range. The space is well designed, staff engagement with the children, and then both classrooms are very welcoming. That's what came out in those observation scores. And then areas we want to consider and spend more time talking about, more time for reading. Assess the special schedule. Right now, there's built-in time for specialists like art and music and gym and science to be able to spend time. But with that, what we're also noticing is it does pull away from those other areas that are part of the standards, like playing with blocks and drama play and parallel play and those other pieces. So we want to just assess that and see how we might be able to do that differently to meet other needs. Again, build in more time for play. Review ways math is integrated with opportunity for targeted instruction. Right now, they do a beautiful job with integrating it through their circle time. So they're doing math with days of the week and the months, and when they're doing other activities, they're counting. But what we really want to see if we can do is integrate some targeted instruction, especially with understanding written numbers and use of math materials themselves. And then we want to look at, in the 4-year-old room, we just want to look at the furniture a little bit and see if we can get some more comfortable furniture, especially in that reading corner, for kids to be able to go over and grab a book and maybe sit in a comfortable seating arrangement. And then also what we're doing, and we started to do this already, is assess the number of staff per session. We've met as a team and we've really started to talk about a program design for preschool, meaning that the program design should have a built-in ratio of teacher to students. And with that, that should meet all their needs. And then if there's a significant need outside of that, then we can evaluate that and determine it. What we did notice that there were times that there were almost as many adults in the room sometimes as children. And so we want to really, be very mindful and looking at how we staff the programs. With our parent survey, some of the commendations were certainly the classrooms are child-friendly, the preschool teachers are helpful, teachers are amazing. These are pretty much quotes. Teachers keep parents informed, the office staff are helpful, communication, curriculum, and then students are prepared for kindergarten. Two of the areas that stuck out the most certainly were the hours. Parents brought that up quite a bit. And we get that. We get that as we certainly observed, what happens in a 2.5-hour period. And then the other thing is really providing more opportunities for parent universities, excuse me, for, for parent training and parent opportunity to access resources. For the instructional assistant survey, some of the commendations were that, and it was interesting meeting with them because they were just so excited about how lucky they were to have the amount of materials available to them to engage children, the classroom size, the data collection on student progress, routines, and teamwork. But the area that came up the most in terms of what we really need to address is the assessing their training needs. Part of the problem with the structure right now is Wednesdays are our PLC days, so that's our early release days. Well, our instructional assistants in the preschool are only 0.8, meaning they don't work on Wednesdays. So this is why this has come up, and we really need to look at ways in which we can provide more direct training for our instructional assistants. Excuse me. In our parent focus group, some of the commendations were the socialization opportunities, the routines, the curriculum is strong, fantastic teachers, excellent care, emotional regulation, activities encourage development, and parents are respected. Some of the areas we really want to begin to talk about is, having the parents meet all staff and figuring out a way to make sure that that can happen in a meaningful way. Again, the hours. We talked about an additional parent-teacher conference that came up as well, that there's one meeting in the beginning of the year, but parents really would love to know how their children are progressing. So how might we build in an additional parent-teacher conference? And then communication books for students with IEPs, again, finding ways to really facilitate communication so parents are aware of what their child is doing. And then for the instructional assistant focus group, some of the accommodations were they understand what is expected of them, the teacher communication, the teamwork, a loving environment, and the standards. And again, areas to consider, the professional development, the staffing pattern, and assessing the schedule to include more reading and play. And then the last piece, which was a self-assessment, this is obviously the heaviest because this is coming from the team in terms of what do they do really well and what are things that we really need to start thinking about and building greater opportunities for our kids and our families. But the accommodations, programs and activities to engage families in improving student achievement. And that came from parents talking about the ability to really consult with the teachers and ask questions about, this is what my child's doing at home, what can I do? So that's just an example. Informative school communications, they use an app that shoots out communications so that parents are getting what their schedules and activities are. Promoting understanding of different culture, recognizing and addressing class and language differences, addressing issues of race and racism, building a strong, broad-based parent organization, drawing on community resources, and family engagement policy. Areas we really want to sit down and talk more about is really being able to meet the diverse needs of our families culturally, face-to-face interactions with our families throughout the year, opportunities for families to observe, support in the classroom, survey families yearly on their experience and provide opportunities for them to provide feedback, develop procedures to assist parents when they have concerns, adding more friendly signs inside and out to welcome families and visitors and explain how to get around the building. And that came up, and I didn't put that in here because one of the bigger issues for parents was the actual drop-off and pickup. But I didn't put that in here only because that was because of COVID, that we had to redesign our drop-off and pickup. So we're like, oh, that'll change next year, but we heard them. And for those parents, who talked about it, we said, well, it will go back to the way it was. Because right now, the little munchkins really have a long walk down to the classroom. And I actually timed it when I was there doing my observation. So we know that's the struggle, so it will be fixed for next year. Additional parent universities, which we talked about. If you notice, there's a lot of consistencies in the variety of ways in which we get received information. And then finally, creating a system for helping staff and students learn how to pronounce all students' first and last names correctly. And yes, that is really, really important, really important. And I'm saying that now because I'm announcing all the athletes tomorrow, and I looked at the list and I said, I know every one of these kids. Yes, I know how to say their names. But I had called up, I said, please make sure that, I have all the students' names so that I understand how to pronounce them. So that's just something really important. And that's just, again, a summary of the evaluation. And again, as you saw in the report, it was a pretty lengthy process. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And question? I knew it was coming. Ms. Tolley?
Yes, thanks, Melissa. That was really great to hear just how it's gone and how everybody is evaluating it. It's inspiring. I think it sounds like we're in a good place and there's a lot of room to grow and improve, and I'm excited about that for the district. And I wonder, a couple of questions. With the feedback that there's, it's challenging within the 2.5-hour window to have students have the opportunity to engage with all of the materials or have experiences that allow them to work on specific standards. What is the, thinking, conversation around lengthening the day in order to give students more time, more reading time, more playtime, more drama time, more time with blocks, all those things that you spoke about that were part of the evaluation?
So that's exactly what it is. It's a conversation, and, having to think about it. And when I looked at the number of students we're serving and the need to have opened a third classroom, we could never service that many students if it was a longer day, because we would then need 6 classrooms. So it really is, we do have to have these conversations and really understand where the towns, where the district, where folks want to move with that, because first of all, remember, we have to provide early childhood special education services. So how do we do that, right, first and foremost, and then how do we do it meaningfully for those students where we want them to engage with their, with their friends? So I think it's something we have to just continue to have a conversation about where we're going.
So what would be the next step in that process to keep the conversation going?
Keep the conversation going. I think we, again, it has a lot of implications, because to add 3 more classrooms, there's more than just a conversation about, that would be great. And the other thing I want to say about the standards is, what I was trying to explain before, what unfortunately happens is, even with a fuller day, if you looked at that evaluation tool, you still could never implement all of those standards. So even if you looked in the report at those subcategories, if you notice, there's no way. Because in a full day preschool, and I had done some research years and years ago on full day versus half day for preschool. There's a difference between preschool and learning for children that age developmentally and what they're able to actually do, and then it becomes daycare or childcare, right? So even with that, really thinking about what is it that we want our preschool children to accomplish, ultimately being prepared for kindergarten. So what are those critical skills that we need to focus in on so that they're ready for kindergarten, which includes the social emotional learning piece, the peer relationships piece, but some of those foundational skills, in the math and being able to count or even recognize numbers and letters and sounds and those pieces. So it's just a really, really big conversation, because adding 3 more hours to these Munchkins' day is extremely taxing. And so we have to think about developmentally, are they able to manage that kind of day? So those are the conversations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Stout?
Yes, Melissa, this looks really good. The questions that you highlighted in here, were they all the questions from the survey or just a sampling?
No, they were all the questions.
Oh, great. So I love to get all the questions. It gives a really good idea what people are thinking. I love the way you did that, and also how it was broken out to how things might be easy to deal with and what the proportion, the percentage was of people rating that, so they could be addressed. I think this is very helpful.
Thank you.
Ms. Rogers?
Hi. First, I wanted to see if I could request the early childhood environment rating scale. That would be really interesting to see. And then I was confused about the questions about program to teacher ratio, and how sometimes it seemed like there were as many teachers as kids. I'm just confused how that could happen.
So,
Was it because of instances, or because it seemed like we had the ratio down for how many kids per teacher? So it was just surprising, and I was looking for clarification.
sure. So what was happening in the classrooms, because some of our students are between the classroom and receiving services. And so because some students might come out of the classroom, right, with a staff person, and another staff person might be coming in, like the speech or the OT, as well, and then the science teacher or the art teacher, like, so you're including all of those adults in the classroom as well. So if you have a couple of, students that leave with, say, one staff, but you still have all the other staff that are in the program, plus the, the unified arts or teachers, it was a lot of adults. And so as we kind of looked at all of our students, we have a really nice new assessment for really identifying level of support students need. We instituted that this year for us to get a really good handle on when we're assigning a one-to-one, or when does a child really need a one-to-one. Because we know from the research as well, and if you read any of Jean Greco, right, he is kind of the master of this. If you look at the research, what we do know is that students can become very reliant on adults, right? So our job is to teach levels of independence, right? To remove kind of that need for one-to-one attention. So what we were seeing is we had several students who had a one-to-one, and as we assessed their need, we're like, yeah, but they don't need one here, here, and here, but yet we still had it, okay? So there were just oftentimes a lot of adults in the room that weren't necessary, and especially as I was observing independence, I'm like, great, that's a great opportunity to start to fade that. So when we met as a team, we looked at what would be a really solid ratio that would really support students. So we said a 1-to-2 ratio in the program is a really good ratio, right? So including the teacher, one person is really able to work with the two students, support their needs, and then be able to assess anything that's above and beyond that. So it was at a point where, students unfortunately were being assessed earlier that needed probably more support than actually was needed, that they could have maybe been in a 1-to-2 already. And so if we have that built in as our program model, right, that's going to create a high level of efficiency of supporting our students, and then assessing separately for any additional needs. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Tolley?
So actually building on that idea of a program design and a program model, is that actively underway, or is that something that will be implemented for next year? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, we actually met, and the teachers were excited about thinking about a program model and design, and so we are going to institute that next year. We've assessed all of our students going into next year, so we were able to really create that program model. And I'm happy to share the assessment tool that we've developed to really, really very clearly pinpoint specific areas, so whether it's self-care, whether it's behavior, whether it's academics, whatever the case is in terms of support, we can now really assess that early on and then determine if there's a higher level of support that might be needed. Typically that would be for some challenging behaviors and safety. And then that will then allow us too, when we're especially with the new classroom now, which is going to be so wonderful for these kids, because now these kids will have an opportunity for really explicit instruction, and then the ability to go into the integrated classroom with the skill that they've already worked on versus trying to work on it, in a setting where their peers are kind of watching and wondering what's happening. So that ratio really accounts for that as well. So that is our plan for next year. Teachers are excited about it.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. And so with that program design, is that something that will be sort of foundational for future academic years, or do you think there'll be a tweaking and an adjustment to it every year based on the assessment of the children that are in the program?
So the 1-to-2 ratio is the foundation. So that coming in, so for example, as we looked at that ratio for September and also looked at the kids coming in October and November, what we could see is, do they fit into that 1-to-2? And then that we can assess, what session would be the best given peers and given their supports. So that's a much better design, to be able to support students. So we do have that plan, and we have the grid ready for next year. So we're excited. And the teachers are excited because I think part of the struggle for teachers sometimes was navigating around a lot of those adults, in all honesty, and trying to run the classroom, but also manage the number of adults and what was happening with the students. So we're really happy to move forward with that model, and the teachers are excited about it.
Great. Ms. Scott, and then Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Melissa, for the background and the presentation and not doing both, so have that to refer back to. I just had a thought and a question with the parents with areas to consider for hours. Do you suppose that is because they feel like their kids need more time in the preschool setting, or is it because the parents need them to be in a setting for them for work purposes?
Yes, most of the comments were related to it's really tough to drop them off and pick them up at that time. It's really tough to find daycare, following that. I don't recall, and all the comments are, I don't recall someone say, my child needs more hours. It was really, and that's why I was talking about, is it preschool or is it daycare, right? Because a lot of the other programs that are full days, they're not doing instruction all day long, right? There's nap time and more snack and more eating and more play and things, most definitely, and that's the way it should be, right? Kids should be playing. I've always argued, that we expect our preschoolers and kindergartners to have a 4th grade, reading level, right? So we do need time for that. So I think the hours piece is just that conversation. What do we want? What do we expect? How do we accomplish that? I think that's why there's a conversation about, universal preschools. But you still look at, when they have those conversations, is it instruction or is it daycare? Not to minimize daycare, because kids learn in daycare. But what is it that first of all, what is it we're responsible for, right? So the first thing we have to recognize is that our responsibility is to students with disabilities, and that's why we have a preschool program. If we want to do something more than that, then it is a bigger conversation. Does that make sense?
It does, yes, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I just want to say thank you for all this work. Both of my kids were able to participate in the preschool program, I think, over a decade ago now. And it was a successful program then. They had wonderful experiences, and the teachers were so reflective about every move they made back then. And I just want to say thank you for all the work that all of them did, that do every day. And then just this added piece to really dig deep and see, where are the places that we could make adjustments and make improvements to really best meet the needs of all the students that participate in the program. So just to thank you.
Thank you. Thank them. I've always said that preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers are a different breed of cat. Yeah. I always say they can pick up a piece of dust and make something amazing out of it. So.
And Ms. Stout, did you have a question? Sharon?
Yes, I did. I did. So I have 2 quick questions. Melissa, the first one is, with the occupational therapy and speech and language, or any of PT, any of those special needs helpers that come in, do the kids usually go out to those, they go in preschool?
So we have 2 models with our students. We have a model where they get what's called in and out. So the speech and OT and the PT will go in the classroom during an activity that's relative to the student's goals and work with them in the classroom. They'll also take them out. That's why they usually have 2 sessions of those services. They'll also take them out so they can discreetly work with some of those goals. But the speech and language pathologists and occupational therapists spend more time in that program other than just what's outlined on a student's IEP, because they're integrating a lot of those skills for all students, especially the language, the gross motor. So they're really an integral part of that team.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. The last question I have is, the preschool, the and 4-year-olds, are they blended together, or if there's a separate 3 and a separate 4? Or do you see those as different when you're thinking possibly about like day? And how could maybe that after-school program work in to help in this regard possibly?
There's a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old room, and then the intensive special education classroom is a mix of 3 and 4-year-olds. So we've looked at a model of, especially to identify students in groupings of, really mixing 3 and 4-year-olds. But we keep coming back to really for those 4-year-olds that at the end of that year, so from, say January to now, is really honing in on those kindergarten readiness skills. So, other than really, being able to say that they differentiate instruction in preschool as much as they do in any other classroom, you certainly could do that. And there may be a time where we have to think about that, because when I look at that 62 number, I'm thinking, ooh, we may need to reconsider, what it is. And also developmentally, certainly we could say that certainly there are some 3 and 4-year-olds developmentally that would work very well together. We could also say that 4-year-olds would model very nicely for 3-year-olds. So there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I think we have to keep thinking about these program models as our students come in and just be very reflective of what is going to be in the best interest of all of our students. Did that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Yes, you did it thoroughly. Thank you.
Ms. Tomasco?
It's Tomasco, but I'll let it slide. Hi, Ms. Mcguire. Pardon me if I sound a little uneducated and lispy. I have braces, and I'm learning. I'm practically y'all's intern. But I was taking down some of my questions. For one question with the green that you mentioned, where it sometimes said rarely, scores in all categories range from fair to excellent with no scores below fair. Were you using average data for this? Because I know you mentioned using average data. So for one, we have rarely, and then in the sections where you used average data, was that?
So there's 2 things. There was a survey.
Mm-hmm.
Those survey data are the actual data.
Okay.
If you're looking at the circle, the pie graphs,
Uh-huh.
those are the data. Those aren't averages. Those are actually responses, percentage of responses. The kind of the grids with the blues and the yellow, red, and green charts, okay, those, because there were 5 observers who scored based on the criteria for scoring, all of those averages for every indicator were taken, and that's how that score was derived.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then you mentioned parent universities. What exactly does that mean?
So what those are, and it's a lovely term for offering parent trainings and parent education. So we offer parent universities throughout the year across all of our buildings in a variety of topics that are important to parents. And so some of the topics that they talked about and came up frequently, one of them certainly was behavior. How do I, really effectively work with my child who might have some challenging behaviors? Or how might I support my child, who has some language difficulties, and what can I do at home? So really offering opportunities to come in and work with the professionals to learn strategies and learn ways to work with their child at home to reinforce the skills that we're working on.
All right, thank you.
You're
That makes a
welcome.
lot of sense.
Thank you, Ms. Tomasco. Those were excellent questions. If you don't ask them, then you don't know. Then you can't figure it out. You're lost like me. Thank you, Ms. Mcguire.
Thank you. I'm going to stay right up here, though.
I'd like to welcome Ms. Melissa Mcguire for the Wellness Committee report. Thank you, Ms. Mcguire.
Hello, Melissa Mcguire, Director of Student Services. I'm going to have Ms. Hughes join me. We're going to wait for it to load first, though. I have to say I had 4 champions tonight, 3 champions tonight, and 2 are here. Ms. Cindy Gush, who cannot speak, so she cannot come up with me. I do have Ms. Sharon Hughes, and then I had David Crosby, who was at a baseball game. And when he emailed, I said, the decision is never, do you come to school committee or do you go with your family? I'm sorry, no disrespect. I said you go hang with your family. And I said it's A-okay. So I'm happy to present the Wellness Committee progress tonight. Do you want to come up, Sharon? Thank you. This was a really good year. We did a lot of work, so I'm really excited to share the work we did this year. Maybe? Oh, is it just delayed? I don't know. Wait. Oh, don't, okay. All right, so as I've presented every year, the Wellness Committee is regulatory. We are required to actually have a Wellness Committee, and we seek volunteers. Every year, I send out a communication not only to all of our parents, but to our high school students and to community members who might be interested in participating on the Wellness Committee. We have three purposes. One is to develop the district wellness policy, which we develop and then provide to the policy subcommittee and then, of course, the whole committee. And then we need to vote on our policy every year. It gets uploaded to the state. We develop measurable goals for nutrition promotion and education, physical activity, and other school-based activities that promote student wellness and rely on evidence-based strategies. And then review and assess the implementation of the wellness policy and our goals. There's been no movement. As you can see, we have a pretty nice list of members. And I did them alphabetically because sometimes I feel like that's the only fair way to list people is alphabetically. But we do have a nice mix of parents and teachers. We did have 3 students, and they're not listed because I have found that students take on so much. And they take on so much when they already have so much. So their intention was phenomenal, and next year, I really want to think about how might we really engage students where they're not necessarily having to come to more night meetings. So I'm thinking about that. But we do really have a nice group of folks. So we met 4 times this year. In our first meeting, we reviewed our goals and breakout sessions. We met remotely all year long. And then in January, we reviewed progress towards our goals. This year, what was interesting is, in the past, we've kind of developed goals that were really specific, and we decided to do something different and develop goal areas and then have the principals develop goals that met the needs in their buildings, which I think is a much better way to approach it than us saying this is what we should be doing. And then in March, we began the process of an assessment, which we use through Healthy Generations, which is a pretty intense assessment, which I actually included, if you can read it at the end. I didn't know how to make it any bigger, but it's pretty intensive, and so we started that process. And then in May, we met and we pretty much finalized what we have done for the year and created this presentation. So just to let you know, it's not just about meeting 4 times a year. In the beginning of the year, what we do is we publish it on the district website. We send it out to all staff. We also send it out to all families in the beginning of the year. And then, of course, we have our meetings, and then we're standing here, June 9th, and then we will present our recommendations. So one of the goals was to send out a food service survey to students to really find out what was their favorite meal and see if we couldn't get some leverage on that. Now, what I do find fascinating, 2 things. One, mac and cheese, that's like a no-brainer. I feel like that I would have checked that off myself. But the second most favorite was chicken Caesar salad. So I was kind of stoked about that. Okay, that's really good. Now, pizza was next, but again, I can't argue with any of these things the kids are saying, and it was honest, I was surprised at some that weren't actually kind of high on the list, like steak and cheese sub or whatever. But so it was interesting to see, what kids were responding to. But actually Garth used this really to kind of look at the menus and make sure that there was a mix of the things that kids were saying that they really enjoyed. And of course, he does a lot of promotion of, certainly the fruits and the vegetables and those pieces as well. But we did want to know what the kids liked. So we're going to highlight the progress of our goals, but I want to just briefly go over the goals that we had under school meals. Food service would create a survey, which we did, and that was the outcome. Under nutrition, education, and promotion, building administration will work with food service and teachers to promote nutritional education. So if you notice, this is where we have building administration, right, is really involved in this. Physical activity, building administration will work with staff to develop goals to increase physical activity. And then finally, communication with parents, food services will publish an educational newsletter, which I think I included his last newsletter in your in the report itself. I hope I did. On the actual report, I think at the last page, I think I included it. Not in the presentation, on the report itself. Anyways, if you don't have it, I can send it to you. But it's really nice because he highlights some recipes. He did like this whole thing on squash. So it's informative, and it's a nice newsletter. So some highlights for nutrition and physical activity at the elementary level. Fruit and vegetable passport provided to students. Rethink your drink. Display was set up in the cafeteria. Gardening club. Bike safety and pedestrian safety assembly. Taste It Tuesday with smoothies with vegetables and games to decide what fruits, vegetables are being included. Food Explorer, there was after school class for 3rd and 4th graders in collaboration with Barnstable County Extension. Important to note that physical activities provided pre-K to 4. So the preschool kids are also going to gym, which is really nice. They're trying to balance off, going out to the playground, which could be considered gym and made me dizzy when I watched it for 20 minutes, or going to the gym and engaging in kind of an instructional activity. The Kids Heart Challenge in physical education, spring field day, field games. I don't know what that last one is because the Zoom room. Oh, bike rodeo. Oh, that just happened this spring, which was really nice. Did it move?
Not yet. Here you go.
Thank you. What was that? Did it go?
It's changed on my.
Oh, there it is. I am not going to read every bit of this. This crosses the whole district, but certainly areas like Wellness Week, that was in January. So when you see those dates, this is throughout the year. SNAP Ed, which is really nice, they provide, not only do they provide education, but they also have a program that students can sign up for over the summer that is really focused on nutrition, education, really promoting the healthier choices, doing more walk time and structured activities at recess. We talked about the garden club fun run on Friday that's coming up. And that's partnering with Chatham Anglers, they must be angels too. Meditation and yoga stations outdoors. We talked about the Taste It Tuesday. So as you can see, there's lots of attention going into nutrition and physical activity education. We were happy to get all, and I actually didn't list everything in here because there was just a lot. In terms of additional physical activity, the field days, field games, there was club for 4 days, discussing for the fun run, the Kids Heart Challenge. At the high school, there's a whole student mindfulness piece that they are working on. There's mindfulness movements that Dan Schwartzman has been creating with opportunities at the high school, the wellness fair. That was a blast. I have to tell you, it was so much fun. I had a whole station for social emotional learning, and I had to go back and buy, I think, another couple of hundred puppets because students were just so excited with the different things that I had that they could use for calming. But they had CPR, and they had drums, and they had, like, just the stations were incredible. So that was really well received. The weight room, the high school did hire a supervisor for the weight room. So these are all activities that are going on. If you don't think we're doing enough, I feel like we're doing quite a bit. Did I miss you? Nope. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, because I'm just covering for Miss Cindy and Dave, so I don't want to miss Hughes. So this is our Thriving School Integrated Assessment through Healthy Generations. And the assessment covers all of these topics. Again, I'm not going to read them all, but there's quite a few topics that it covers. And what we did, which was kind of interesting, I don't know if you can move the Zoom room up by any chance? What was really kind of cool is we took all of the areas. Now, of course, those are all just the abbreviations for each of those areas. That's okay. I really wanted the bottom numbers. So what we did in the first meeting, we did a breakout sessions. So we had 3 breakout rooms, and we prioritized each of these.
I'll move it.
That's okay. Each of these. Sorry, Zoom room. That's fine. So we prioritized in each of our groups each of these areas, each of these considerations, and then what we did is we basically took the highest number and took a look at, what was really important to folks in terms of what do we want to move towards next year. And what's really interesting is all of these areas, all the 4 that are highlighted, are really about staff wellness, staff social emotional wellness, right, and well-being. And, it was really a nice pause to have a conversation about we really need to make sure our staff feel really good and feel really well and are healthy themselves, because then they're going to do a much better job really promoting health and wellness to our students. So that was really interesting. It was interesting that we pretty much all scored that way in 3 separate sessions. So that was interesting. Whoops. So those areas include strengthening social emotional health, cultivating staff well-being, supporting school health services, and fostering positive school climate and culture. And I think it's a really nice complement, because certainly part of our strategic plan talks about our school climate and culture and our social emotional learning. So I felt this was a nice representation. And remember, folks on that group are not just staff. There's a lot of community members. So it was really nice to see that we were all on the same page with this. And I'm going to let Ms. Hughes highlight some.
For me, if you don't mind.
What's that?
You can keep clicking for me.
I'll try.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Hughes. I'm the assistant principal at Harwich Elementary. And the next 2 slides are slides that I created that very much encompass everything Melissa Mcguire had just shared. I focused on cultivating staff well-being and fostering positive school climate and culture. And I know a little bit of it's hidden there because of our Zoom friends out there, but that's okay. It's fine. So I wanted to just loosely define school climate. And when you think about school climate, the perception is really about how people feel. And when you think about culture, it's how people act. So we want to think not only of our students, but our staff and how they're feeling and treating each other. So this was a great way for us to really celebrate the wonderful HES heroes we have in food services. And this came from Garth sharing at one of the wellness meetings that Melissa and I were at, that he said, well, sometimes our cafeteria staff feel like they aren't really part of the community and they aren't connected to everybody. So when I heard that, I said, I have an idea, because we have such creative kids and so much energy and enthusiasm that they have. So we put this out that we would do 4 different months to really celebrate heroes in Harwich. And it began with the food services. And then that was March. And in April, we did the admin assistants. In May, we did our school nurses. That'll be the next slide. And then in June was our custodians. But I want to just highlight here the pictures and the people. We have 6 wonderful cafeteria staff, Monica Appleton is the first picture. The second is Kim Tipton. Our third is Leslie Maker. Fourth is Linda Jordan. Fifth, Jan Lovett. And sixth, Francie Cecilio. And they were so excited to receive all these pictures and drawings. The top picture, where you see it almost looks like a collage, it was made by kindergarten students in Mrs. Jean Gregorio's classroom. Each piece of paper is a piece of bread that they drew. And on the bread, they wrote different things like, "We love you, thank you, I love sun butter, sandwiches." Like they had help writing some of these things. So some of it was scribed, some of it was written, but their names were on each piece, and it was heart-melting to see this piece. Again, that top right, second in from the right, it was so huge. It is 5 feet by 4 feet. So it was like carrying a poster or a map downstairs to hang up. So I have to also thank Laura Kavanaugh, who gathered all these beautiful items to make the wall of HES Heroes, which is the bottom picture on the right, where you see I'm standing with them, and it says HES Heroes in the back, all different pictures, including that big collage. And it's just, their faces were so excited when we delivered it that day. Excuse me. I have to say, when I received this letter from one of the cafeteria, we gotta go back one. Oh, it's okay. Yep, I wanted to pause on that because Kim Tipton, who is the second person from the picture prior, so just ignore this for now, Kim wrote to us and said, "Dear Sharon and Mary, as it's my first full year here in the cafeteria of Harwich Elementary, it was my first experience with a staff appreciation program. I can only say that I was deeply moved by the wonderful letters and pictures given to us by the children. As food and cooking has always been my way of expressing love, the gift of thank you notes is one of the most beautiful and memorable moments of my life." So for someone to say that is huge. "I truly enjoy what I do, who I work with, and seeing the smiling faces of these children every day. Thank you for making this happen for us. Thank you for the staff and their support and their humor. I'm truly grateful to be part of the Harwich Elementary family." So that was wonderful to see from one of those cafeteria ladies. So thank you, Kim Tipton. And I did share it with Scott and several others so that everyone could see that. And now for our HES Heroes Health Services slide. This was a wonderful highlight too for both our school nurses, Holly Giavano and Cheryl Coder. They're down in the left corner. That's the day they received their beautiful bags of drawings and pictures and cards with heartfelt love from the kids and appreciation. The Red Cross picture was a beautiful, almost three-dimensional card that could open up, and it said inside of it, "Nurses, nice, helpful, caring, healing, our school superheroes." So it was just beautiful to see those words come from their minds and be written down, and it also tied in writing. So I was happy to see the writing elements in there for the kids. So everyone, preschool to grade 4, participated in these HES Hero activities. But for the sake of this, I highlighted just our nurses and our cafeteria people. But there, again, there's 2 more months. In our last month here, we will highlight our custodians. And hopefully they'll be thrilled with the wonderful cards, letters, and drawings that they'll get. So that was it for our part of the staff well-being and positive school climate and culture. Thank you.
Sure. All right, and bringing it home, recommendations. Again, we're looking at working with the building administrators to develop goals in the target areas identified through our assessment, which is the 4 areas I talked about earlier. Utilizing the Healthier Generations tool and resources to provide support and resources to building administrators. What's really nice about this program is it's just not an assessment. There is actually a resource for every indicator, and it's we can actually apply to be Healthier Generation superstars, and we did get that. Interestingly enough, I just don't know how to. I'm not sure how to manage it. I need a little PD on the program itself. So when it popped up, I said, "Wow, we're superstars!" But it really goes to actually how much you do this assessment and where your scores lie. So. And then finally, next year we'll begin the process again of reviewing the wellness policy for the year after to once again bring it to you. And that's it. Any questions?
One more time? Absolutely correct, just like hearing it. These are more comments. First off, adorable. I was almost crying. It was so heartfelt. I loved every second of it, as well as the information, of course. And then just a little note for Miss Mcguire. Why aren't, Taste It Tuesdays and We Treat Your Drink and those wonderful things part of the high school? Because I'd like a smoothie day.
I think you should start it.
Oh, absolutely.
I think you should start it.
Those sound wonderful. Okay, thank you.
I see Sharon's hand up. Sharon?
Yes, I would just like to say, there are many things I could say, but I think the only thing I'm going to say is how very much I appreciated the cards, the thoughts of appreciation for the nurses and other women there, and you can tell how much it meant to them by some of the responses. So I think we can't overdo appreciating people. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I actually just had a brainstorm while I was thinking, and I maybe there already is, but you were talking about how to incorporate the students' smoothie recommendations into the wellness committee, and I don't know if there is currently a club during JOSM that could be kind of a subcommittee for wellness, for the wellness committee.
Awesome.
Maybe they could report out or report in or something like that. But if there is interest in the wellness policy for the school and for, contributing at the student level, that might be a time that they could convene.
Awesome. It's a great
So-
idea, even with menu or
Yeah,
exercise
whatever their
classes,
contribution at the
whatever
student
they
level
want.
is, but JOSM Hour I know is a time where they can do clubs and things. I know a lot of them are student ideas, so student idea, wellness. Yes, Ms. Tomasco?
I volunteer myself for this club. I will drop my leadership position in GSA. I will be the entire service. I will.
She's putting that in ink.
I know you, Miss T. All right.
This is recorded, you can't back out.
All right.
All right,
great.
thank you.
Seeing no more questions? Fantastic. Ms. Games has joined us. Ooh, she's joined me. No, it's all good.
Thanks.
All right, moving on, thank you again, Ms. Mcguire, for the double header. Moving into subcommittee assignments. In everyone's folder, my microphone is on, you will find the subcommittee representative and liaison assignments. Because we're reorganizing, every year we ask each of the members to contribute to the form, write in where you would like to participate, in which subcommittee representative role or liaison role, and then get that back to me. Is our next meeting June 23rd? So actually, if I could have that back on a date prior so that I can get it done, if the 20th, 21st would work for people, is that okay? Is that okay timing? I know it's kind of a short, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 days. That gives me, 24 hours put together. That would be great. So, Ms. Leah Timbolio?
I was just going to say, I can email out to everyone a blank digital.
A digital copy would be great. If you need to drop a completed copy off to Leah, that's completely fine. You can email it to me, you can hand deliver it, whatever you would like. You can put it in my mailbox. Mr. Russell knows where I live, apparently. That's fine too. Are there any questions about the form? And there are already completed people that think they know what they're doing. Ms. Stout, and then Ms. Tully.
Yes, I'm sorry. Somebody rang in my Zoom down, so I missed the last couple sentences. What topic are we on, and what are you trying to schedule?
Oh, sorry, Sharon. You missed a lot of sentences, but I'll break it down. This is the subcommittee assignment sheet, which is in your packet. So every year we reorganize. So if you can just fill out which ones you'd like to participate in and get a copy to me or to Leah, whatever's most convenient, and then I will compile them, and then we will talk about them at our next school committee meeting on June 23rd. If you could have them back to me by the 20th or the 21st.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful.
You're very welcome. Ms. Tully.
Just wanted to clarify, because there were a few little doodles and eyes over here, that the regional agreement working group is still necessary because we have the cleanup to do.
Okay.
Dr.
listed on
Carpenter
here.
is, okay.
Yeah, it's on here.
Okay.
I think the Googles and eyes are like it just won't die.
Yeah, okay.
I wrote no. On that section.
Yeah,
I
Nancy.
think it's just because it's still there.
Okay.
But yes, absolutely, that's not going anywhere. If anyone under review, if we're missing something on here, let us know. And Sharon, your hand is up again. Do you have a question? Oh, never mind, she's good. Okay. Ms. Tully?
Yeah, is there, I guess, a culture or practice on the school committee regarding rotating subcommittees? Is there, I guess, kind of a historical way that people have rotated in or out or stayed?
This is only my second time doing this, but in my experience back in 2019, I don't know what it was, basically people move themselves. They're like, I've done, historically, when I came on, this is just you started kind of in policy subcommittee in kind of the less, let's say, intense roles to understand how the subcommittee worked, understand what they did. Policy, for example, is a great one to learn, to start with, because you learn a lot about the school committee and how it functions very quickly. Negotiations, finance subcommittee, that's definitely something I personally wouldn't have jumped into right away until I was more confident in knowing what I was doing. That's just kind of the way I have always looked at them, where my interest falls, what my schedule looks like. You know, I personally might not sign up for something that required me to meet in the middle of the afternoon just because of my work schedule, and some of those committees are like that. So that's generally how it goes. There isn't a set, like, mandatory rotation. You may see the same members on the same subcommittees multiple times. That's where their comfort level is. That's where their expertise is. If I find out that I have 6 people signed up for negotiations, then I'm going to have to talk to the 6 members and figure out what the best move is to do. So that's the most information I can give you right now. Is that helpful?
Yep, definitely. And a follow-up to that. So for the policy subcommittee, my experience was I was put on that, I joined that, and the standing meetings already existed. We didn't decide a schedule together.
Yeah.
Can you what's the word? What's the best way to know which of these either subcommittees or liaisons or representatives have standing meetings that are already in existence that would, either preclude or encourage one to express interest in it?
Yeah. So upon reorganization, and similarly to what we discussed in our policy subcommittee the other night when we were talking about setting our next meetings, is that when you are placed in your subcommittee, you will then determine when your meetings are and where they are and what time they are. So if policy subcommittee has always been on a Monday, every 2 weeks or such, it may now change to a Wednesday or a Tuesday, depending on the members and what the best day is for them. Finance subcommittee is not a regular rolling date. It's typically as needed, and then extra meetings are added in, but it's not a regularly scheduled subcommittee meeting. Negotiations, when you're in negotiation time of year, they're more regimented, and they're not often not always set by us, but they're set by the union. Yep, by the team, so not as much control about that one. Warrant and payroll is just going to do signatures, so that's whoever signs up to do it. Superintendent evaluation, much like policy subcommittee. Westgate Foundation, it's not something we set. You attend when their meetings are. Sick bank, I don't think there's any attendance for that. We haven't had anything in the past, but again, that would be like kind of as needed, much like finance. Cape Cod Collaborative, you go when the meeting's scheduled. District Wellness Committee, you go when the meeting's scheduled. For PAC, you go when the meeting's scheduled. Select Board and Finance Committee liaisons, you go when the meetings are scheduled. Regional Agreement Working Group, you guys will set, the subcommittee will set that. Legislation, Tina, she would kind of go or bring back information from that, so that was kind of up to her at that point, so it would be up to whoever is that liaison. And then the Strategic Plan Steering Committee, that would be, whoever's on this, well, it's Danielle, Sharon, and Jessica, unless that changes, plus Scott and Mark, so it's whatever you guys decide. Does that help?
Yep, thank you very much.
Can't believe I knew all that.
Good.
I know.
That was impressive.
Wow. Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Tomasco, would you like to be on Finance Sub?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I have $12. I don't know anything. Well, I don't know anything about money. If I don't have it, I don't know anything about it. I do have a question, since you guys are signing up for kind of your roles and things for the council or advisory council that I'm on. If you are interested, one of y'all could be a representative for the student voice, and we've kind of converged all of these different subcommittees into what is called student voice, where we have people like me and Molly involved in the school committee. If you guys would like to be involved in that, or we could add that to the sheet, that'd be great.
Okay, and I believe. Yeah. Yeah, so, thank you. I apologize, I was turning to speak to Mark Smith because we were discussing that this week, and there is a policy, but I think because it didn't get up and rolling this year, we want to take a look at it. We're gonna actually send it back to policy subcommittee to just review it. May not need any changes. Once we kind of refresh ourselves with it and what's needed, we will come back to you with whether we can have a liaison, if you're a liaison. And Ms. Henderson, do you have something to contribute?
I do.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you're asking for a school committee member to join you at your meetings.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, actually.
So could the group just let us know when the meetings are and invite us?
So Ms. Mcguire and I were having a conversation prior to the start of the meeting. So we do think you probably do need to bring it back to policy subcommittee, just because of the way the language is currently written. The way the current language is currently written, it reads like the entire school committee needs to meet every other month with that group. And I think it would be best, and where we were thinking it would be best to have a liaison to the group, just because then you're gonna have to have it's just gonna get really cumbersome really fast, right? Yeah. So, we thought you probably want to bring it back and then adjust that language in some way so that you can have a liaison to the student advisory committee. We being Molly, Christina, and I had a conversation about recruiting and expanding because the student advisory council is intended to be a little larger than just the two of them. So we have some plans to expand that group heading into next year as well. So I think if we were to work on both fronts, I think heading into next fall, we'd be able to hit the ground running, so to speak.
Great. So, thank you. So we will stay the course, send this back to policy, get eyes on it again, make sure it makes more sense. And then we, throughout the year, often find something that we would like to add a person to as a liaison or create a subcommittee for. So just because it's not here, and just because it maybe isn't going to be written here on June 23rd, doesn't mean it won't happen, because I'm not sure where on the policy list that policy will fall, because we have quite a few, but certainly we can bump it up. So, that being said, we will get back to you on a possible liaison from the school committee for the Student Advisory Council. Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry for making y'all's job harder.
Nope, great questions. No problem with questions. All right. I don't see any more hands. Okay. Next item on the agenda is remote participation conversation. The reason this is on the agenda is because the impeding July 15th expiration of the remote access is coming up, obviously, July 15th. Ms. Tolley had, I believe there's the Senate, article in our folders, which includes the remote meeting extension in the state budget bill, and then also the verbiage for the remote meeting extension that is part of the Senate amendment. So legislation, although 1 to 2 years out on voting, have put an amendment in proposing in the FY23 budget to extend remote access to December 31st of 2023. Then there is actually an amendment which is to allow the continuance of the legislation while it's being debated, and expecting a vote for that, for the extension, within the month, or hopefully a decision will be made before July 15th. So at this point, in the event remote access is or is not extended, we need to have a conversation about our role in that, and how open meeting law guidelines, quorums, etc., fall into place for us. We do currently have a policy for remote access. Ironically, the policy subcommittee is one of the policies we're working on. We have had it. It's in the works. It unfortunately will not have any impact on whether or not, with what happens with open meeting law, but it is just generally our policy if there was a reason why someone needed to be remote for a certain amount of time, what that time frame looks like, for what reasons it would be. So we are working on that, but they're one and the same, but they're not. So at this time, remote access is still permitted at the committee level, and we just need to talk about as a committee what we'd like to do. We've kind of been doing a little bit of research ourselves just to kind of see where we are on the radar, and it seems that I believe we're one of the last standing schools on the Cape functioning remotely, or partially remotely, including most of the town boards. So just some information to start off with, and then I open it. Ms. Tolley.
Yeah. So thanks for laying all that out. My understanding is that this amendment that is passed, the Senate passed it as part of the FY23 budget. And I spoke with a state senator, Senator Lewis's office, a couple of days ago. And he was the one who had sponsored the legislation for the modernization of the open meeting law, which is also currently being debated. But his office has said that they don't think that there is any urgency that they need to pass that legislation because this amendment is attached to the budget. And there's quite an appetite in the House to keep this, and they don't expect that there's going to be debate or that the House would strike this amendment once they have their debate about the budget. So there's the general feeling is that this amendment is safe, and there's the large likelihood that remote access will be continued through, as the amendment says, at least December 15th, 2023. So if that gives us a little bit of confidence, or, feeling like maybe there's not as much urgency to have a conversation about what that means for us.
Okay. Any other comments or questions at this time? I mean, we don't have an action item for this. It's just more of an open conversation. I mean, I think to be clear, we do need to be better at pushing our speaker on. Unless we hear otherwise, I anticipate we're going to be going, quote, live, non-remote by July 15th, unless that amendment passes, and at which time then we just kind of continue on status quo. But I think that as a committee, at a committee level, we should also have a conversation about what we would like to do moving forward, because we don't have to continue to meet remotely, and that has to be an option as well as remote access. It's something that we discuss. Is that Sharon's hand?
Yeah.
Ms. Stout? Oh, I didn't even see the other little yellow hand.
Yes, I think this is the way of the future, to have hybrid. And I would speak, it allows participants from the community, it allows participants from the school committee to use that option as necessary. In our case here, because of my immunocompromised thing, need to continue this anyway. I did check with the ADA, and they said whatever we've got, we need to continue. Visual, and I'm hoping that it will just be passed by the Senate and the House anyway, just because it's a timely, what's happening around the country for work. I'm not saying everyone needs to be remote, but I think this is a really good, enables more people to have some flexibility to be there. And in our case, I think it just makes sense.
Thank you, Sharon. Ms. Tully?
I would agree. I think it's about access and equity, and allowing remote participation just increases both of those things, I think, for many, many folks. As we've seen, the amount of people that are able to join in a Zoom meeting, our ability to conduct even subcommittee meetings remotely has been extremely convenient, and I think it allows just more participation. So I would, I think it's a positive thing that's happening. I understand there are technical challenges, that occur, but if we're just talking about it and discussing it, that's where I am.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms. Scott?
I hear that. I hear that it's great that we have 3 committee members that probably wouldn't be joining us if they couldn't be on Zoom. But I find it a bit challenging. I find I think cumbersome is the word that comes to mind, because there is that technical challenge. Presentations are not always clear online versus in person. There's, just the technical lag. There was a couple times where I was home on Zoom and you recognize the lag, and I can recognize it now from when I was home versus being in person. And I feel like it kind of takes away from the in-person conversations. It's very difficult to have the full conversation and to understand where people are truly coming from. I do like the fact that people can chime in from home for public comment if they need to. We haven't had many lately. I don't even know when the last person from public comment spoke via Zoom. But I think the access that even being the live stream on YouTube, which is what we've had before, allows for that. People can watch from home, watch the meetings live, even if they don't have cable, channel 22. I have a bit of a challenge with the fact that we don't allow any of our faculty and staff to be remote right now. If they're out, they're out. They can't participate and teach the classes and like they were last year, right? All the years kind of have blurred together. But even as of last year, there was the ability for teachers before April, when the governor forced everybody to go back. Now it's coming back to me. We don't allow our employees to have that capability even if they're in a position. So I feel like we should be representative for them. So if we can't make it, we can't make it. If we have to be away from a meeting, we have to be away from a meeting, but we should strive to be in person. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. Games?
Yes, I will echo what Nancy is saying, because I'm struggling to hear and pick up bits of conversation tonight. And I think I was just actually, I had the bills pulled up just preparing for this conversation. And I'm just trying to long-term bill. I think it's optional for the body, but I need to double check it. Because I do hear what Sharon is saying as far as if some have a specific need, like ADA, something that's ADA compliant. But I have to agree, I mean, I think it's just best to be in person, particularly for a smaller body like us. I mean, I think I would understand if we were a state committee and we were spread out all over the state. But I think because we're all local and we're doing local business in the community, I think it makes sense whenever a little research to see just how the quorum is affected as well. So we're just kind of weighing in. It does provide an opportunity for somebody that might not be able to, like I did tonight. I had a work meeting, but I did want to try to make as much of this meeting as I could. It certainly allowed me to join, but my preference would have been to be sitting around a table with all of you, because I'm just struggling to pick up bits and pieces of things.
Thank you, Tina.
I think that's it.
Ms. Henderson?
And I'm loud. I have a similar feeling about being at the table together. I think that an in-person meeting for a small body that we are is important to have these important conversations together. I think even just as Tina was speaking, we were getting a lag. So I just think that our conversation can flow more effectively if we're all sitting at the table. And on the flip side, I do feel like, some of the forums, the parent community forums that we've had were more effective virtually. So I think that there is a place in our community for virtual opportunities, but I think that as elected members of the school committee, I would love to see us all back at the table.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Mr. Terry Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief, and also I'm going to echo Nancy's. I think partially the pandemic brought upon some really good ways to get things done that prior to that we never had to do. This is one of them, and so it's here to stay. I've always felt that personal contact in a meeting with small groups, and I know I'm almost mimicking what Meredith just said, is the ideal to create relationships of an elected body. Without that, this is a long-distance situation in which is going to be, in the future, further perfected and used. And I'm not debating or arguing against that, especially in the area of health or some other areas where someone would have to commit to that. I commend them to continue to work and at the same time have a health issue. But there is nothing like personal contact. It's a commitment that you make when you run, that you're going to get here that night. And relationships are built on, I think, that personal contact, not this remote virtual experience. So I think we have made the best of it. There are some large forums that it did bring more voices into the conversation 2 or 3 times this year. But I really agree with Nancy's insight into it, as well as Meredith's and Tina's. And so we'll try to continue with getting here as best we can. And when we can't, we have this other option.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Sharon, your hand up again? Yep. Sharon?
Yes, it is. It is. Yes, it is. Yes, I think everybody points. I don't disagree if the people that feel like it's best in person have anything more than I get in person. If I didn't have this issue, I would be there in person. But I think what we can see here, times that where somebody has a sick child, like Tina has that she wouldn't have because she had a late work night. And there have been, that no matter what happens with the legislature, I think they're going to require a majority to be in person, having a majority in person. But I did suffer through all of COVID, listening to people in masks talking, and in starting this, and while there were all these big masks going on, it was difficult. Hearing everything. And the I don't know, the technology could be better now. I'm not having any at all hearing what people are saying. Is there a little tinny thing once in a while? Yes, it might not be quite as clear as if I were. I certainly don't compare myself in any way to the staff. I think the staff get paid, they work very hard. They have a completely different, if I was required to do their job, I'd be expected to at least be paid what they're paid. We're paid nothing. We volunteer. Every single one of us are very dedicated to do this. There isn't a comparison for that. I don't think we are role models for them. I think the administration would be, other teachers, specialists, but that doesn't extend in this kind of situation. So I think that we have some slightly different versions on things, and I think all of them okay, as long as we don't exclude what's important to some to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. So because this wasn't an action item, and thank you everyone for your input and your feedback. I think it kind of gave us a census or consensus of what the group is thinking and feeling. I don't think there's anything we need to do at this time because we're kind of in a holding pattern. I guess my question is, our next meeting will be June 23rd. Do we put an action item on to vote whether we want to continue to be remote or not? Or do we wait until, or do you want to wait until there is a ruling for the extension and at that time handle it? Because it sounds like there's, well, I'll just leave it at that. Ms. Tolley and then Ms. Scott.
I would prefer to wait until we see what happens with the budget passage and if this amendment stays intact.
Ms. Scott?
I was actually going to say the opposite because I don't believe our next meeting before July 15th.
Is it literally the day before?
I hear 14th. Is that?
So
the next meeting is on the 23rd.
I'm sorry, after the June
23rd?
meeting.
14th.
It's
the 14th.
It's July 14th.
Okay, so we have 2 meetings, so I was just thinking in terms of looking forward, if it expires on July 15th and we don't have, I guess if we don't have a vote,
Yeah,
vote, it
I
doesn't
think
matter,
that
but-
time is of the essence when you're getting that close, your day before, because then it's the elephant in the room and what we're doing and how we're moving forward. Because we're already here in person, so it's not necessarily required that we are remote anymore. It's only allowing us the privileges of being remote still. So to me, it makes sense to have a vote on, my opinion, just would be to have the vote on June 23rd, whether we're going to continue with remote or not, because then we can just move forward, regardless of what the state comes back with.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
So when you're saying, so currently we are allowed to continue like it was COVID. So we could all be remote currently if we wanted to be. It could fully serve as the school committee as a fully remote meeting.
Correct.
And therefore we could also do a hybrid. If the budget amendment does not pass, so it passed the Senate, it has to go back to the House and then ultimately through the governor. Therefore, we have to wait for that to all happen. If that does not all happen prior to July 15th, it's going to expire on July 15th, and we have to be in person. There's no allowance for remote.
Correct.
I guess my question is more leaning towards, can we have the public or the school committee in person and allow for remote participation from the public, much like the Chatham Select Board does? Is that allowed to continue regardless of the extension to the current law or the current, whatever the word is?
Yes. I'm going to, Danielle's next, then it's going to be Tina, but I just wanted to, one thing you said, my brain says that at some point, even though we were still remote, we as a school committee took a vote. Did we take a vote to come back in person? Or it was encouraged that we be back in person because our staff and our faculty were back in person? Was that what it was?
I think so.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify. Ms. Tolley.
So I think I'm trying to further clarify what you're asking. Right now, we're operating under the, the certain provisions of the COVID measure, yes.
I found the word that I was looking for.
COVID measure.
So that allows us to have a quorum, either virtually or a hybrid. That will only continue if this amendment stays intact and the budget is passed. We currently have we already have a policy, as Jackie mentioned, that allows anybody who needs to be remote participation has that ability to do it.
Right.
So we still could foreseeably have several members of the school committee need to be remote for any reason at any future meeting, as long as we have a quorum that is present in person.
And the chair.
And the chair. That's already intact. That would be something then that I would think we should look at on the policy subcommittee to see if there are any changes to that language around remote participation that we need to tweak to better serve what our needs are if we don't have this extension.
Ms. Gates. Looks frozen.
Yeah, I was just, kind of reviewing my notes, and hopefully you can hear me okay. It's still bleeping out for me, but maybe that's just where I'm located this evening. But I just want to say too that should we choose to continue remote access, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the Zoom room. I mean, it can be, I'm just actually reading the proposed legislation, and telephone is an option, so, because I've actually, in my role with the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, I've been privy to some of the other school committees and how they've done this, and it's not all the same. So should we choose to keep a remote option of some kind, as long, according to the legislation, it just says that it's adequate. So we get to define what that means. What does adequate mean? Because I've been at other school committee, or either been there or attended for various reasons, where they've passed around a laptop around the room, kind of on a speakerphone. So just, thinking about it, kind of forward thinking, if we're looked, it doesn't necessarily say you've got to do it by Zoom. It just says adequate is basically what's in the legislation. So, just to kind of put that out there too, because I know people come in via telephone, if they have to. But I do believe, if I'm reading the legislation correctly, that a quorum still has to be in the room, and the person running the meeting needs to be in the room. So whether it's the chair or the vice chair, that person has to be in the physical room, which I think Danielle said, or somebody said, maybe it was Nancy.
Thank you, Ms. Games.
To go back to your question on whether or not we take a vote at our next meeting, I think being that the current measure expires on July 15th, I think the July 14th meeting, I think is an appropriate time for us to make that decision, because there's differences of opinion in amongst our committee, and I think following through to that extension is an appropriate measure.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about voting on this for July 14th, whether we maintain remote access or come back in person? Seeing none, moving on. Housing Advisory Committee. I was going to postpone this because Ms. Gaines wasn't here, but I won't now because Ms. Gaines is here. But the reason I am bringing this up, and Dr. Carpenter, as we all know, we are having a housing crisis, and collectively, Dr. Carpenter and Ms. Gaines simultaneously came to me thinking that we might need to have some type of a liaison, my speaker's not on, or advisory committee or such regarding the housing crisis on the Cape and what as a district we can do proactively helping in that area as it impacts us on the staffing level, faculty level, student level, family level, community level. Ms. Games had actually read an article in the Chronicle, and it was about the Nauset Regional School Committee, and they are forming an advisory committee with the intention of coming up with a solution. The article was called Stuck in the Middle. Police, fire, school officials face housing challenges. So Ms. Games brought up an excellent question and point, and should we have some type of an ad hoc committee as well? My conversation with her, as well as Dr. Carpenter, I think I talked to Dr. Carpenter about it, was perhaps, because we have so many liaisons and subcommittees, would the Nauset Regional District be interested in collaborating with one of our school committee members and work together, as the Cape is a small area, and maybe there would be something that we could do together, or at least work together, bring all the parties to the table, as it impacts us all, similar to what some of the towns have been doing. And also, if we would have a committee member perhaps be a liaison to our housing authority for the town of Chatham and for the town of Harwich to bring that information to that advisory. So at this time, Ms. Games, would you like to talk more about your thoughts or that article, or do you want me to just open it up for conversation for anyone?
Yeah, let me, if I can make a statement, and we can certainly talk about it. This is something that I put up a couple of years ago when I first started seeing that we were kind of headed in this direction, and it is what had, when we were talking about young families leaving, and now we're talking also about hiring. So I think it is an issue, and it really, I believe, falls within our lane, our scope of responsibility. So I just thought it was a good idea. And as I was out having conversations, being on the ballot this year for school committee for re-election, I was having a lot of conversations with people about how we had together. And I do believe it's a responsibility that we have to get in the community and for whatever affordable, attainable housing that we can do. And I just thought it would be a good idea to have a member or two, whether we have the seat, I don't know this with our select boards, where we can actually have a seat at the table, whether it's us just willing, and I don't know, it might be a charter change, I'm not sure, but I just think the school committee, it would be nice to have a voice in some of these housing conversations that are happening in Harwich and Chatham, because we have a unique perspective on behalf of our families and our teachers and staff. So I just wanted to put that in front of everybody. I really feel we need to be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Games. I'm going to open it up to the committee. Thoughts, questions, direction, what we're thinking. I know I have my thoughts. Tina knows what my thought is. Ms. Tully.
I think it's a great idea. I agree that I do think we should be at the table around this conversation. And I think it's a bigger conversation than just our district. So I really like the idea of trying to collaborate with NASET and having a more regional approach to this.
Did we lose Sharon? Oh, no, she's down there. Okay. I feel like I'm playing red light, green light. Would folks be open to the idea of perhaps voting for a liaison to reach out to the NASET district in an attempt to see if they would be interested in allowing us to collaborate with them? Or are you more interested as a committee to take this on ourselves and create our own path? My instinct is that if it's already rolling and they've already got thoughts, I would like to collaborate with them and help and contribute to what they're already working on instead of reinventing the wheel on our end. I think that's more collaborative, and they're our neighbors. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't see anything conflicting with it, especially when it comes to housing. So that was my thought, and my thought was because Tina had brought the article to me, and she's versed in it and has done an excellent job with the liaison piece and legislation and such, that she would be a natural fit, and she probably would be willing to do it unless there's someone else that wants to do it, and that's completely fine too. And so then I guess I would be looking for a motion or a nomination for Ms. Gaines to move forward to reach out to the NASET district and then come back to the committee with a report and then the next steps. And Ms. Gaines.
I actually saw Jessica's hand up.
Oh!
And I'm kind of curious as to what she might say.
Sorry, Jessica, I didn't see. I call them the little Bart Simpson hands.
I think that it blended in with my back.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Miss Rogers.
No. Sure. No, I think it's a great idea. Completely support it. I think it would be great to work with NASET just to see what their ideas are. I think it would be great to tap into some of our, to see where we could help and kind of fit in. So, yeah, no, very big yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Carpenter.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it might be good to also, if we do have a liaison, to reach out to, and maybe this could be done through the chair, but reach out to both chairs of the select boards to let them know that we would be interested in liaising with whatever's happening in our two towns, in addition to what's happening, regionally, let's say.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm wondering if we need, I see your hand, hold on. I'm wondering if we should take a step forward to see where NASET's at first before we move forward with what maybe our plan's going to be. If they're not interested or we end up doing it on our own, it might look a little different with what we're asking. Ms. Rogers.
I was just going to say, when involved, I don't know if there's only one liaison position or two, since it would be going out to the towns, going to Nauset. I would be happy to help if Tina would like some help.
Two is always better than one. Ms. Games?
Yes. In fact, as we were moving on to this, I think personally, I love working, in a collaboration. I think it would be smart if you're willing to do it. Jessica and the school committee agrees. I think it would be good to have a Harwich person and a Chatham person working together. That would delight me if the school committee agrees and Jessica and I can work together in our liaison efforts. With both, we might find out from Nauset.
Great, thank you, Ms. Games. Ms. Scott?
Yes, I echo what both of them just said, and I think it's a great idea, so I will nominate Tina and Jessica to a housing advisory, I don't want to call it committee, housing advisory liaisons, and have them reach out to Nauset School Committee to kind of start that conversation and report back, and we'll find out next steps from there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I don't think we need a roll call. It's just a general consensus that everyone agrees.
Oh, I made a motion.
Oh, you did make a motion. You did. She made a motion. I'll have a second.
Second.
Ms. Toll will second that. Okay, great. Now we'll do a roll call. Ms. Rogers? Nope. Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Okay. Miss. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Games?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Ms. Secretary, I didn't even call your name. Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
It takes a lot, Karen. It takes a lot.
I've tried, aye. Okay, great. That goes, there we go. Thank you. Leah, you got that? Good. All right. Moving on to the first reading of the 21-22 Summative Superintendent Evaluation. For those of you who have not been here for the superintendent evaluation.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, Ms. Games. Yes, Ms. Games?
Sorry, before we move on, may I make a request to put the housing advisory liaison sheet? Would that be okay?
Put it on the sheet.
On the sheet?
On the box sheet.
Yes. Can you add that to the sheet, Leah?
Thank you.
Welcome. There's a big white
Thank
square. Okay. Okay, so next item on the agenda is the first reading of the 21-22 Summative Superintendent Evaluation. Just as a brief explanation, this is our opportunity. Each of the members did an evaluation for the superintendent. Those evaluations were then given to the representative selected to summarize, calculate the results, and then prepare a summative which represents the committee as a whole. Tonight's purpose is for each of the members to have an opportunity to have a response regarding their individual evaluations, and then I will read the summative, which ironically this year was prepared by me when I was vice chair and selected for it. So at this time, I think I'll start in the Zoom room, if you guys don't mind. And so I'll start with Ms. Games, if you'd like to share feedback on your evaluation or a brief summary, or you don't have to.
Actually, I would, and could you call only because could you give me, and could you call on Jessica or Sharon and then come back to me?
Yes, I can, absolutely. Jessica, are you ready to report out on your evaluation? Nope. No. Okay, not tonight. Ms. Stout?
No. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a photo. So, on the first of it, oh geez, professional practice goals, significant progress, student learning goals, significant progress, district improvement goals to be met, and then, let me see if I can post them. I got this on my photo here. I'm so sorry. I didn't keep a copy except on my photo.
Can I pause for a minute?
On the instructional leadership, for everything, and for data decision making, I put exemplary. On the, let me see, I'm going in the wrong direction. On the management and operations, I put proficient on everything. And systems I spoke about specifically. The superintendent had very strong performance in areas during the in-person schooling during COVID, especially prior to April vacation. Then I made a comment basically about the hiring being challenging to housing issues. The exemplary part was that along with the school attorney and school committee, the superintendent's job on making modifications, changes to the regional agreement in order to be fair to both towns, allowing their elementary school and to Harwich to pay their fair share.
Thank you, Sharon.
Wait a minute, I'm not done.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
And so the family and community, there was needs improvement on some things only because I'm feeling that that is a really important area, and I don't think schools in general do a great job in that. So I'd like to see more, effort on that. Our two first meetings were very, very well attended, all virtually, and not so much after that. So it appeared to me that when parents are very concerned about something, they seem to show up. And the area, the one area I wanted to note for needs improvement in the evaluations go on that you do, Jackie, is to have strong collaboration or stronger collaboration with all members of the school committee to promoting family and community support the new strategic plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stout. Ms. Games?
Yes, and hopefully you can hear me. I think we're demonstrating tonight where the remote can be a little, so hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm just going to run through. All right, so on the profession, I marked met on all three of those for the superintendent. Step 2, standard 1, instructive, I marked the super as proficient. Standard 2, management operations, proficient. Standard 3, family and community engagement, proficient. Standard 4, professional culture, I marked exemplary, and I'm just going to scroll down here to just add, I marked the superintendent overall proficient, and I just wanted to, just a couple of things real quickly. I think Dr. Carpenter deserves huge applause for the work he did on the changes to the regional agreement. I think that was a commitment. Really applaud Scott for bringing this to our attention a couple of years ago. And I just think he worked really, really hard to make this a reality. And I really want to give him all the credit he deserves because he initiated this and worked with school committee members to educate both communities on the positives of the regional agreement amendments. The superintendent and the business manager and I think we were on maybe 3 different Channel 18 appearances to really advocate for this. I thought the superintendent did incredibly well as an advocate at select board meetings, town meeting floors, speaking directly to parents, schools, residents, with his communications with the local press. So I think he, in my mind, just deserves huge, huge applause in that area. And I also wanted to just note in the professional development, I've always been impressed, and certainly it continues to be, that the superintendent is always looking for ways to just further professional development for himself, for his leadership team, for staff members. He's always looking out for opportunities to further his understanding of learning, and he stays abreast of the latest educational philosophies and methods. I've learned quite a lot from the superintendent, and I think he's always staying on the cutting edge. So that's why I marked him exemplary, because I think he just does a terrific job in the area of professional culture and just building an environment that really encourages learning for himself, for his leadership team, for his staff. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 things that I thought really just went above and beyond this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Games. Ms. Tolley, just so you were in the room for that brief moment that I said, just this is the opportunity for each of the members. You can either give a brief summary of what your evaluation was. Some choose to read through their evaluation and read through their markings, and some choose that their evaluation spoke for itself and then it will be relayed through the summative. So it's really up to the individual members what they'd like to share at this point. So at this point, the 3 up there have gone, so it would come to you, Ms. Tolley.
I think I will, I think my evaluation speaks for itself as part of the summative. The one thing that I'm not sure that made it into the summative, I actually didn't see a copy of this yet. It wasn't in my
Should be in your packet.
I didn't have a copy, but I also don't remember seeing it in the digital version either. It wasn't? Okay. So anyway, I haven't seen this yet because I don't have a copy in my packet. One of the things that was a challenge for me in completing the evaluation was reading through the, for lack of a better word, the guide that lays out, how as school committee members we are supposed to evaluate. It really struck me that we're supposed to look at evidence. And this is what evidence is, and it lays out, these are examples of what evidence is. And there were a couple areas where I felt like, I think I would like more evidence in this specific area because I felt like I didn't have enough in some, this isn't actually, that's not going to help me, but there were a couple areas where I would request more evidence moving forward.
Okay.
That's it.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, I had one in my packet, so I'm thinking it just might have just been your packet. And I apologize. I got them out as fast as I can, but I didn't get all the evaluations in on the requested date, so I had to then fit into my schedule doing all of the calculations and doing the summary. So I apologize, but I got it as soon as I could. Ms. Scott.
Yes, so I rated Dr. Carpenter overall as proficient, and I will read my comments. When the 2020-21 school year concluded, I think we all had the expectation and hope that this year was going to be a breeze. It did not start out that way, and Dr. Carpenter handled those challenges with relative ease. Taking the time to hold the conversations with the superintendent were incredibly helpful to hear the concerns from the parents and the community members, and then also to respond to those comments and concerns. I also always appreciate, I just realized I have a typo, I also always appreciate Dr. Carpenter's desire to push Monomoy's administrative team, teachers, and students, this year's focus being on ARC and math. I would like to continue to see those two programs supported and moved forward, as I see them having a great potential for our students. And finally, there is the regional agreement. We all know that I love that so very much. Dr. Carpenter did continue to push for the equity in the financing of our schools between our two towns. He attended board meetings and educated many, including us as a school committee. Dr. Carpenter was the main driver behind getting the regional agreement changes passed at both town meetings this spring. Thank you. It only took 5 years. Overall, I continue to be impressed by Dr. Carpenter's leadership of Monomoy and rate him as proficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Russell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In all categories, I judged this past year for Scott to be exemplary. Appropriate tonight, I thought. Mark got up and spent a lot of time sharing what this past year in his role has been. Melissa spent a great deal of time explaining to us what her role and her committees have done and what they are expected to do. We've had Michael come here share every 3 months. All of that is a reflective of the leadership of Scott. So how those people generate their quality, I think, is a direct connection with the superintendent of schools. Few comments from my summative. I saw 3 critical areas different than probably everyone else looked around with goals. There were 3. One is our general budget that has to be created, approved, agreed upon, and patiently walked through almost a whole school year. The second has been this ongoing pandemic. And the third to me was the Chatham demographic in the elementary school with less and less kids. All 3 areas, I think he did an exemplary job in creating solutions at all 3 that went smoothly, brought clarity to it, and prompted all of us on the school committee to feel proud of what we've done. A couple of sentences I'll read. When bolder and stronger leadership was needed, as it related to the period of pandemic, Dr. Carpenter provided both elements throughout the school system. Scott's creative and ongoing efforts regarding the Chatham Elementary School student demographics led to a successful and equitable solution in both towns. I can hardly read my own. Oh, that's not. Home away from home. Started with our former principal here at the high school. I think that kind of clarifies Scott's ability to bring culture and improve on it in all 4 schools. Scott, over the past year, again has exceeded my expectations. Monomoy is fortunate to have him in his leadership. It's been a privilege working with this exemplary professional.
I gave you an appropriate amount of pause at the end, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Henderson?
So I'll just give a brief summary. My overall summative performance rating was proficient. However, I did gave you a score of exemplary in the family and community engagement. I feel that this year that stands out to me. The clear communication with the family and with families in the community as he handled some challenging situations throughout the year, and it looked like with ease. I know in the background it may not have been, but I think that our community and our families appreciate all that you do to make sure that they are informed and understand what you are doing as the leader of our district to make sure that our students and staff are safe each and every day that they're here. Whether it be COVID or other things, but so I appreciate that, and that's just my 2 cents to add.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Henderson. I will read my evaluation as a school committee member first, and then we'll go forward from there. For Dr. Carpenter, I had an overall rating of proficient. However, in the areas of family and community engagement and management of operations, I marked him as exemplary, and I wish there was a higher scale I could vote him on, or vote him in, or grade him on, because my words won't even cover the tremendous job he's done over the past years, and especially this year. I will reflect on instructional leadership. Dr. Carpenter continues to support excellence with curriculum chosen at a district level. He monitors and interacts with staff closely to determine efficacy and uses data analysis and measurable outcomes as a consistent tool in our schools. MAP continues to show value with multiple years of data. Although ARC recently adopted shows promise, it is my determination that it is premature to determine its efficacy. There are too many factors, including factors in our past curriculum practices, supplementation in the new ARC program, as well as students' decline as a result of COVID years lost with inconsistent curriculum delivery. Regarding management operations, Dr. Carpenter has done an incredibly good job considering the climate of decreasing workforce on the Cape. Not only is he aware of this issue, but is already proactively working with community stakeholders and the housing crisis. He has tirelessly worked on hiring the best there is and to retain the best we have within his purview. Beyond staffing he is instrumental in maintaining and enhancing our operations, team, technology, and ground of the district. The staff and grounds speak for themselves. Regarding family and community, I have never heard of or seen a superintendent more transparent or supportive than Dr. Carpenter. Before, in, and after a pandemic, he was engaging in communication, whether in person or via technology, to our staff, families, and community. He, in fact, does more, in my opinion, than is necessary for a person in his position who collaborates, monitors, supports, and organizes what he does. He is exemplary in this standard, but perhaps will never be noted for this because simply no one is ever happy enough with what is available and directly in front of them. Professional culture. The main focus in this standard for Dr. Carpenter this year was supporting the change for fiscal inequity between our two towns, moving our regional agreement through both towns as well as our budget. What stands out to me is building consensus and keeping the best interest of the district in mind. And that is the end of my evaluation. So typically what happens, just for those who weren't in the room when I discussed it, is I tabulate all of the evaluations for everyone, which is all here. And for those who contributed not only their evaluation, but comments in their evaluation, I use those in the summative to reflect all of the committee members and their feedback. And hopefully I did a good job. So, the Monomoy Regional School Committee Superintendent Evaluation Summative. The 2021-2022 school year is near the end, and yet there's still so much work to be done. The superintendent evaluation from the Monomoy Regional School District is a culmination of goals and standards to be met, matched, and exceeded. After careful analysis of each completed evaluation for Dr. Carpenter, the performance standard he has earned is an overall rating of proficient. The progress towards both his professional and student learning goals have been met, and there is significant progress with district improvement goals. This year, we have seen growth in our approaches to assessment through instructional leadership. MAP testing is now available for grades K through 10, and the district introduced a new reading curriculum ARC. Monomoy continues to be a progressive leader in this area of education. The superintendent supported new curriculum initiatives in multiple ways, but most impactful were his walkthroughs in both elementary schools witnessing the implementation of ARC. The committee reflected that in a short amount of time, it was evident ARC may prove to be a highly effective curriculum, and the prepared presentation by administration and staff was supportive. However, with many variables since COVID and the slip in children's reading levels across the country, we hope that there will be a positive impact reported in future presentations to the committee. The management of a district, as one may imagine, is not an easy task, and there are various moving parts. Over the years, Dr. Carpenter has supported and developed a team within the district who share his passion, his passion for excellence. Throughout the 21-22 school year, the district's management excelled during the pandemic. Dr. Carpenter is proactively working within our community regarding the housing crisis as it directly impacts recruitment of staff and housing for our families. The superintendent is instrumental in maintaining and enhancing our operations, technology, and grounds of the district. Family and community engagement does not lack in this district. Dr. Carpenter continues to modify his approach to reach as many families as possible with the support of his team. The district received bi-weekly reports and updates on the pandemic. Both in-person and virtual forums were held to educate and inform the district with a consistent message, following the guidelines of our public health experts, while also listening and supporting all voices, no matter the political or personal views. Weekly and sometimes daily updates via email, robocalls, and social media are prepared and shared with our students, staff, families, and community members. The superintendent held numerous budget presentations and regional agreement discussions with community stakeholders. One member states on their evaluation, quote, "Scott's family and community outreach has been outstanding," end quote. Professional culture is an evolving piece in any district's ability to grow. Dr. Carpenter reflects on his ability to build consensus in our community while keeping the best interests of our students at the forefront. This year, his work with DESE, both town select boards, FinComs, the school committee, and community members for both Harwich and Chatham were a job in itself. This resulted in unanimous support from both member towns on the budget and the amended regional agreement in an effort to support fiscal inequity. Overall, the committee is pleased with Dr. Carpenter's performance, and we will continue to guide and support his district goals and vision. That's what I did this week. Right. I will take questions, I guess, or comments at this point, but I think everyone is, Ms. Gaines, is that a new hand? Or is that a clap? I'm blind.
It was applause. It was applause.
Okay, all right. Can't delineate that. Ms. Rogers?
Well, we get digital copies of what you read because I
Yes.
haven't seen it.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. All right.
Next steps, just a reminder.
Yep. Thank you, Nancy. So just as a reminder, the next step will be we will vote on the 21-22 summative superintendent evaluation at our next meeting on June 23rd. And I believe actually Dr. Carpenter signs it. Leah has copies of all of your evaluations that she keeps, and then she also has a copy of the full evaluation, the calculation, and the summative that I prepared for tonight. Right, and moving on to the, oh, look at us, we're moving right along. Subcommittee representatives liaison reports. Ms. Tolley?
There was just one thing related to this on the policy subcommittee that I wanted to mention, as it also relates to some of the homework that we have of signing up for which committees and liaisonships we would like to have. And that is this policy subcommittee has determined that we need to have one August meeting, right? Jackie, is it just one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Typically, I understand that we don't have policy subcommittee meetings in the summer unless absolutely necessary, but there is a policy that we have a deadline on in October, and so we need to have a meeting in August. So if you are interested in being on the policy subcommittee, know that once we have been assigned, or once the policy subcommittee has been assigned, you will be scheduling a meeting in August.
Perfect.
I think Danielle just said I'm on the policy.
Take that as a, could be a warning, could be an invite, I don't know. Okay, great, thank you, Ms. Tolley. And then moving on to superintendent's report. Mr. Superintendent, Dr. Carpenter.
First, I just want to thank you for your comments during the annual, very awkward superintendent evaluation. Nothing like being publicly evaluated on camera and. But anyway, I think for me the key word in there is team, and it's not just the team sitting behind me. I think what we were able to accomplish with the regional agreement again was the team sitting at the table too. Had it not been for Nancy's tenacity and Tina's tenacity and Terry's and other chairs over the past years, we wouldn't have gotten there. And had it not been for Danielle stepping up to a mic. I think together we helped move something forward, and just what happens day to day is I have three of the best central office administrators here. I've got a wonderful assistant. I have Joy, who I think is just an exceptional communications person. And I think together we're able to go and work with also some really talented and committed principals to go, I think, create that culture that I think is really what I think does set Monomoy tangibly apart from a lot of other districts. In terms of recognition, just I think back to that whole team concept and looping in with graduation, I really want to applaud Jen Police and her staff, the class advisors, Rose Richards and Steve Cass, for just a wonderful graduation. I felt like I jinxed us because I left to head to graduation. I was commenting to my family. I said, boy, it took me about 20 years to figure out that when you're wearing, sort of your doctoral robe to graduation, you don't need to wear a suit coat underneath so you can stay cooler. And boy, I was wishing I had worn a suit coat under, because when the sun went away, I think the temperature dropped 25 degrees like that. And but with the exception of the temperature, it was a wonderful evening. I had a nice time. I was a little worried. It's like live speech, daughter graduating, will I tear up? But I sort of found a nice way to kind of address what I think is the elephant in the room for a lot of people when it comes to graduation. It's this notion that I think kids feel like they're supposed to have life all figured out, and the reality is that we don't have life figured out. So I started writing a graduation speech in my head prior to Thanksgiving, and much to my parents' chagrin, videotaped them at the Thanksgiving dinner table and asking them what they thought I was going to be down the road when I was 17 or 18 years old, to which my mother responded, a cowboy. And I played that and focused on the superintendent / cowboy, which apparently I have epically failed at being a cowboy. In terms of COVID, the last 5 weeks, 5 weeks ago, we were at 50 new cases for the week. We were in a nice dropping down, 37, 21. Last week, we went back up again, back to 37. This week, thank goodness, we're back down to 19, and we seem to be into a good place. Although every time I say that, somebody else in central office is 1 degree of separation from the next batch. So let's just kind of keep our fingers crossed that 19 continues to be sort of the high point, and we drop off heading into the vacation week. In terms of a security debrief, it's been a very interesting last 2 weeks since we were together. On May 27th, we had a bomb threat that was directed at the high school. It was an automated call that had come into a police station, and it was very specific about us and our high school. And I think that I was very grateful for for public safety and their response. And I think we also have to kind of take into to context that there have not been many bomb threats recently that have come in. So so to have one be so specific that there was a response that in the 8, I think, previous bomb threats over my career as an administrator, this was the first time that the state police were scrambling dog teams down here, and we actually had dog teams that came from Weston all the way to Cape Cod on a Friday. And it did make for a challenging day. We did a complete evacuation out of the building. Given the weather, we were able to go move everybody to Brooks Park. There was a police surrounding our students, and we worked to. It was pretty clear if teams were coming from Weston, by the time they got here, by the time they went through the building, it was going to be sort of the end of the day. So we needed to look at how do we get kids home. So we truncated the day, got the school buses and sent people home, then had the parents come pick up kids, and then had those that drive come to their cars after the parking lot had been swept by the dogs. But again, it's if you think just that one event and what's happening behind the scenes, if we kind of go back to that whole concept of team, I'm very grateful with what I have. It's on sometimes I feel like it's we have the Maverick Top Gun out there, and if we use sort of that sort of analogy, it's sort of like you're scrambling the jets, except you're scrambling the team. And so it's like I get a phone call. It's like I'm calling Mark. It's like, I need you to do this, and usually Mark, it's I need you to go and come to wherever that crisis is. And again, in an aircraft carrier scenario, you've got the air boss, and you've got what's called the mini boss that are trying to deal with all of those operations. So I'm oftentimes interfacing with the principal, public safety, and trying to understand what's happening and kind of communicating to Mark to help that with the assistant principals and everything here. I also Joy gets one of the next phone calls. It's like, I need you there so we can start communicating out in real time as fast as we can. Melissa, I have communicating with all of the other principals so that everybody understands what's going on if something's happening in one building. Mike's holding down the fort. Leah's taking phone calls at central office. So it's a big coordinated team effort that that unfortunately we keep getting lots of practice on lately. So we did. We also, when we have events like this, we also go through debriefs. So we've actually debriefed what happened that Friday on May 27th thrice. We internally debriefed immediately following it. We had a debrief with public safety where it was the administrators and public safety, and then we brought together our crisis team to do a bigger debrief. One of the things that I think are lessons from that day that we want to work on over the summer and refine is the reunification strategy. One of the biggest challenges we actually have are parents. And where are we going to tell parents to pick up their children if they need to pick up their children, so as not to go and clog the roadways around the school? So it did get rather challenging at Brooks Park with all of the parent pickup that was going on, and so we're trying to work through, so we sort of had a reunification approach, and then we were comparing and contrasting that to when we have actually grabbed all of the buses, moved everybody, and we've had several years ago a situation at the middle school where we evacuated everyone at the middle school to the high school, so that we could address the middle school situation, which was again a bomb threat, and reunify everybody over here and have Harwich deal with the reunification and support that, while also addressing the building and making sure that it was going to be safe and ready for learning when everybody was back in. So we need to go really spend some time, and we're gonna be gathering together this summer and looking at those reunification plans and have different scenarios. If it's in town at the building, at remote sites, and then at an adjacent town. But again, it's like each event, it's hard to go and say, it's like, here's exactly the way that crisis is going to play out, because there are so many other things that you're having to take into consideration. Is it raining? Do you have access to the buses? All of these little factors play in. As chance had it, last Friday, we get a phone call mid-morning from Harwich Police, because Harwich Police has gotten a phone call from the state police that a threat came in. So again, scramble the team. Everyone arrives here at the high school. It's pretty clear in the initial moments when we're gathering together that the nature of the threat is vague. Vague, not in just that it didn't seem to be Monomoy specific, but there also seemed to be different versions of what was called in on an automated call to state police at the Bourne Police Barracks. So there were Harwich detectives reaching out to Bourne to clarify what was heard. And I think in hindsight, then I was reaching out to other superintendents, because we seem to be taking a more protective posture for a vague threat about potential weapons in schools, but it could have been anybody. And and again, I think the way that communication chain trickled down, I think people said, well, Monomoy had one, maybe Monomoy, but I think there's some things on public safety side to address communication chain. Clearly, we found that there's a communication issue that we need to address and debrief. So we have a specific crisis team meeting to specifically address our communication snafu. That we have that meeting scheduled for 5 o'clock on the 21st. So behind the scenes, where our biggest communication issue was, as the teams gathered, I asked Principal Police, how many minutes do we have till the next change of class? So do we need to have students and staff sort of stay in place, or or are we did the block just change and we've got about an hour to kind of resolve things? So the request was to make an announcement to stay in place. Somehow that announcement got or the message got miscommunicated, and in our lockdown plans, there's a specific term that said, and in your packets, there's sort of an emergency preparedness manual that's hanging in all classrooms, all offices, and then under the lockdown terms, the specific thing that gets said is, it goes lockdown, 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 this is not a drill, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And that came over the intercom, and I was just like, that was not a stay in place communication. That was, if you're hearing that as teachers, you're supposed to be getting ready for the worst and getting ready to exit. So moments after that went over the intercom, a correction was, sorry, this is supposed to be a stay in place. The concern I have, and what's been bothering me ever since, is that 2 classrooms did what they were supposed to if they heard that message, which is, if it's safe outside your doorway, get out of the building. And so I've been discussing with public safety and others. This was the first time we've ever said that on an intercom, that it was not a drill. So it's the first time we've ever had a chance to see how will individuals react, and clearly they're not reacting. I think there's just that concept. Lockdown, I think, just by definition means this, but we want them to do something very different. So we need to work on, in sort of the big tome of our emergency manual, deal with the language and spend time this summer and at the beginning of school year training staff and preparing students for, if you hear this, do X. Because if you're hearing lockdown, and what we've been coaching everyone on for years, and I think the committee several years ago had a presentation from public safety on the run, hide, fight protocols we have. The lockdown says this is the stance we're taking, and clearly that message was communicated on an intercom, and we did not see in a building this size people just jumping into that mode. So again, we have a meeting with our crisis team to go and discuss, what's the appropriate way to improve that sort of functioning. I have a meeting scheduled with our staff on the 22nd that I'll call it an end of the year staff meeting, but one of the things I'll do in it is briefly foreshadow the portrait of the graduate thing that's coming next year, but also share some safety thoughts with them, including this sort of language around lockdown. But I'll also be inviting public safety, particularly the police, to be part of that virtual meeting to go and share what I think we've also been seeing sadly in the news, that the response in Texas from public safety is not what the response from public safety that any school district would expect to see post Columbine. And I just want, I would love to have Mike Anderson share with our staff the same way he shared with the crisis team, that no way, shape, or form is this how our two departments have been training, and they train together, they train in our buildings, because I do worry that there's some anxiety out there that staff have, seeing what takes or what took an hour, that wouldn't happen here. And again, that was one of the things I wanted to make sure in one of our crisis debriefs, that we were directly talking with public safety on. So so we will be spending a lot of time over the summer talking about evacuation, talking about reunification, and we have a plan to have student and staff meetings in each building where we kind of reaffirm how we operate in a crisis, as sad as it is that we're having to have these conversations. And then, just the last thing in terms of, practicing being a nimble team. So this morning, I run into a doctor's appointment and my phone rings, and it's Chatham Elementary School. And at the first they were just calling to say that there's a power issue and lights are flickering because a tree got cut down near the building and took down some lines, which caused a short. And next thing you get a call seconds later, it's like, and now there's smoke in the building, and then we may need to evacuate. So I scrambled the jets, and Mark heads over, Joy heads over, Rick Travers heads over, We were prepared to evacuate to the community center, and you got a phone call seconds later that that fire had, they'd figured out the smoke came from apparently a laminator that shorted out in the midst of all of that, and all was well. But it's like you never know what the day's going to hold, and I'm just really blessed to have a team that is so nimble at responding.
Great. Thank you very much for all the updates. May the laminer rest in peace. So we did the Tokyo trip, housing advisory, approval of the payment. No.
Surplus prior year.
Yes, I'm just looking at approval of payment of prior year F-121 invoice.
It's Cape Cod Collaborative.
Oh, right here at the bottom. Okay. So we have a prior invoice from the Cape Cod Collaborative. Anyone interested?
Sold. Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Scott.
I move to approve the prior year invoice for tuition of an SEI teacher endorsement course for $495 to the Cape Cod Collaborative.
Second?
Second.
And a roll call vote. Any questions or discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Games? Ms. Rogers? Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And I am an aye. And then the declaration of surplus.
No, Madam Chair. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, I didn't have my hand up.
No, she didn't. Oh, but Miss Henderson does. That's so
She
weird.
does.
So weird.
Yeah.
I move to approve the declaration of surplus as presented in our packet.
Second.
So, does anyone want to discuss this? It's so disturbing. I don't even know. Okay. Any questions or discussion other than that?
No, we don't.
Okay. Roll call vote. Miss Stout?
Aye.
Miss Games?
Aye.
Miss Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mrs. Russell?
Aye.
Ms. Henderson?
Aye.
And I am an aye. And the presentation of the warrants this evening. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call? Ms. Stout?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines? Ms. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Tolley?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mrs. Henderson?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Meeting adjourned at 9:58.